The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description.
Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your Commander-in-Chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Oh, man. I forgot to do something. So, yeah, give me a second while I whip something up real quick in order to make sure the show runs the way that it's supposed to. I want to start. I can talk to y'all while I'm doing this, though. It shouldn't be too hard for me to do both things, because I did want to start off the show having a conversation with you guys about the Bears, man. These Bears are tricky, man. They're doing this thing the right way. They playing both sides of this thing the way that they should. And I honestly got to give them a ton of credit for the way that they're doing what they're doing right now. So I think I talked to y'all about them interviewing former Ravens, Bills, et cetera, offensive coordinator. What is his name? Greg Roman, right? We were talking about Greg Roman here, briefly last year. It was a fleeting thought. We never really considered Greg Roman for this job in particular because he didn't really fit what we were trying to do. However, his name did come up, right? So he's, to me, the perfect offensive coordinator for Justin Fields. And they interviewed him yesterday. So that stood out like a sore thumb for most of us paying attention to how that situation in Chicago is unfolding. We probably have, outside of Bears fans, Commanders fans probably have the most interest in whatever the Bears are going to do, because we are probably the team that stands to gain the most by them deciding to trade the number 1 overall pick. Now, again, there'll be other teams that are interested, but I assume the Bears don't want to move but so far back. So if they're really interested in getting Marvin Harrison Jr. or one of the tackles or whomever, and there's only a certain amount of space you can move back before that player is no longer in play, I would think that Washington at number 2 would make the most sense as a trade partner with the Bears. So I'm keeping close tabs on what they're doing. And when I saw that they interviewed Greg Roman, I'm like, oh shit, this is a sign. Now, this is the thing. They did not sign him, and that was smart on their part. Interviewing him, all it does is lead people like myself who like to be detectives and things like this and draw inferences. All it does is it leads us down a path that we can't prove anything, but it leads us to a conclusion that may not exist, but that's what the Bears want. Now, I've heard this. I don't know if you guys heard the same thing, but I've heard that the Bears are not going to right now, they're leaning towards not trading the number 1 overall pick and making the selection. Now, with that said, they are also keeping all options open in case someone comes with a deal that absolutely floors them, blows them away, and they can't say no. And I guess by them doing what they've done to this point, it has put them in a position to do exactly that, because now they have to make a hire at some point. Now, the reason I bring this up is because Cliff Kingsbury, if you were following, was brought in, and they interviewed him today. And obviously he was the pass game coordinator and an offensive advisor at USC, which is where the number 1 overall pick is going to come. He came from, essentially. in the UFC Trojans. We know Caleb Williams has a relationship with Cliff Kingsbury. Obviously, he was there at SC the last year was his first year because he was with the Cardinals the year prior. So last year, he had 1 year with him at SC. So there's a relationship there. He can formulate an offense that is comfortable for Caleb Williams. He knows his strengths, his weaknesses, et cetera, et cetera. So it would make a ton of sense if they're going to draft Caleb Williams to give Cliff Kingsbury the job as the OC, right? So you see what they're doing. They're playing both sides of the fence. Okay, we're going to bring in Greg Roman, interview him, in case somebody throws us the wickedest deal we've ever seen and we can't say no. And then we'll just hold on to Justin in that case, right? And then we'll hire Greg Roman, right? But if nothing materializes and we got to move forward with the process, we can hire Cliff Kingsbury, draft Caleb Williams #1 overall. Now we got our OC, guy that he worked with in college, guy that he's comfortable with, guy that can kind of formulate an offense, build it around his strengths and minimize the weaknesses and move forward from there and then trade Justin Fields, and the rest is history. So the Bears are playing this thing as smooth as you can play it, the way that they should be playing it. But at some point, they're going to be forced to make a decision. Once they hire that offensive coordinator, to me, that signifies what they're going to do. I don't know when that final domino is going to fall. To me, that's the one to pay attention to. So if you really want to know what the Bears are going to do, I'm thinking they're picking from a pool of 2 guys. I just told you who they are: Greg Roman and Cliff Kingsbury. If they hire Greg Roman, they're probably trading the #1 overall pick, because Greg Roman and his style of coaching doesn't fit Caleb Williams' skill set. It fits Justin Fields to a T. Remember, he was in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson for about 5 years before they moved on this past year, right? If they go with Cliff Kingsbury, duh, you already know what it is. They're not trading the #1 overall pick. They're going to select Caleb Williams and they're going to trade Justin Fields. So to me, that's what we need to be paying attention to. Everything else, smoke and mirrors. Who they hire as their OC will tell us all we need to know as to what direction they're going to go in. I don't think you can hire Cliff Kingsbury. I mean, you could theoretically hire Cliff Kingsbury, get a ridiculous deal, and then double back and trade the #1 overall pick and keep Justin Fields, and then Cliff Kingsbury is your offensive coordinator. You could still do that. I think it's highly unlikely, though, right? If they're going to give Justin Fields the best chance to succeed, you're going to give him the best coordinator that fits his skill set. And same thing can be said for Caleb Williams. So I just wanted to start out by making that abundantly clear. Now, I've done what I needed to do. We're going to go ahead and get this party started. This is going to be a great show, guys. So there was a lot of things I needed to do, and I'm sorry that I'm kind of scatterbrained right now because my son had flag football practice, and so everything kind of was helter-skelter. I meant to give a shout out to the person that super chatted this the last time we were live, who gave me this idea. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do this. And I didn't get a chance to do it. I was supposed to go back, look up the person who super chatted this so I could tell them thank you for this idea, and give them the credit. I don't deserve this credit. They do. And if I don't give them the credit tonight, I'll give them the credit the next time, because I'll go and find them and figure out who it was and give them a huge shout out, whether it's in the video or I pin it as the comment in the comment section, whatever the case may be. Somebody gave me this brilliant idea to go through Adam Peters' drafts. Now, I want you to keep this in mind. And I'm going to go ahead and set this thing up real quick. I want you to keep this in mind as we do this. He was not the general manager. So when we say his drafts, he was a huge part of what they ultimately decided to do in these drafts. But keep in mind, he wasn't the architect of these drafts. He was just a part of the process with these drafts. So keep that in mind. I don't want you guys to lose sight of that, because I know we're excited, but let's not be giving him credit for things that he actually did not do. So again, this is not his draft in particular. This is John Lynch's draft, which is why he had to get out of San Francisco in the first place, is because he wasn't going to get the credit for being the GM in San Francisco. Even if he was actually given that title, he wasn't going to get the credit, right? Because everybody knows the 49ers for being John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan's baby, essentially. And so he wasn't going to get the credit that he probably deserves had he decided to there we go. So we're good on that now. So I guess we can just stay here and get to the meat and potatoes of why we came here tonight. So what we're about to do, this exercise that I've put together for you, are the 6 drafts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 drafts, rather, that our new general manager, Adam Peters, was a part of in San Francisco during his tenure there. Okay. Now, again, he was not the GM. That distinction goes to John Lynch. This was a coach-centric approach. So that means the lead voice in all of these draft war rooms was that of Kyle Shanahan. The second voice that resonated the most was that of John Lynch. And then Adam Peters' voice was probably third in the mix. So keep that in mind. He was not the guy spearheading all 7 of these drafts, but he had a very influential voice in all of these selections and all of the things that I'm going to talk about. Okay. So just keep that in mind. But what I also want you to think about and understand is all of the things we're going to talk about tonight are part of what helped shape and mold him as a general manager. You know, not just the things that happened to him in New England and the things that happened to him in Denver, but a lot of what he believes in as a GM stems from his time in San Francisco, right? So I also wanted to make that abundantly clear. So we're going to talk about all of that. Give me 1 second. All right. So I'm going to give you some reminders. I'm going to give you some key talking points as we go through each and every single one of these drafts. Video channel, I see your comment. It was me with the idea, so let me give you the shout out right now. Video channel, thank you for this concept and this idea. It was fantastic, and I knew it as soon as you requested it, and I told you we would do this on Thursday night. So thank you, video channel, for this idea. I think it gives a lot of the fans a bit of I think some insight as to what they can expect. Again, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but the situation that they came into in San Francisco is very similar to the situation that he's coming into here in Washington. So I do think there are a lot of parallels between how they started out in San Francisco and how he's going to have to start from the ground up. Remember, when he was asked the question about this roster, he did his best to be diplomatic, but his body language and the way he answered the question told you how he felt about this roster. It's going to need a lot of work. Okay. So, and he's not wrong. It's going to need a lot of work. But again, if they come in here, make the right moves, sign the right free agents, find a couple of gems in undrafted free agents, they could turn this thing around, quicker than some think. But again, understand that this is a process. Do not look at the Houston Texans and assume that that's how it's supposed to go, because again, the Texans did not happen overnight. They had the worst record in the NFL combined over the last 3 years. Okay. They've sucked ass. So please understand that the Texans didn't just happen overnight. They got better in one season, but they had been building towards that, and they dropped the right pieces in place, including coach and quarterback, and then a nice draft class and a few free agents, and they were able to turn things around. But they had already been building towards that for 3 years. Don't forget that. Okay? They already been building towards that for 3 years. So many of you are starving for a winner. You want it immediately. I'm here to tell you that the likelihood that immediate success comes, slim and none. Not impossible, but highly unlikely. But I've already said this, and I've said it many times, and I'll say it many more times. If there's one league set up for parity and set up for a team to go from worst to first, it's the NFL. It's the NFL. So you have 7 drafts in front of you. They are in sequential order in the way that they happened. Okay. So obviously this first draft at the top in your top left-hand corner is the 2017 draft. Under it is the 18. Under that is the 19 draft. Across into your top right corner, 2020 draft. 21 draft is under that. 2022 draft is under that. And then all the way in the bottom right-hand corner is the 2023 draft. So we will go through each of these drafts, but I really want to go through the first 4 years of the 49ers administration after taking over. So that's 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, because after 2020, they had their roster intact. It was in place. They had the players that they wanted, and they were ready to go win ball games. Hence the trade in 2021 for Trey Lance. They were ready. They were ready to go get a quarterback, and if they had to take a step back to develop a quarterback, they were willing to do so, but they knew they had the roster. They had the players that they felt like could win them a Super Bowl. They just needed the quarterback, and they were willing to take a year to figure that out. They were willing to take a year to go through the growing pains that happens with a young rookie quarterback, but they were ready to do it because they knew they weren't going to go but so far with Jimmy Garoppolo, but they knew they had the roster to get it done. And it took them 4 years to build that bully that they now currently have in San Francisco. So we're going to go through the process that took place essentially to get them to where they are right now. So we start in 2017. So before we start to analyze the 2017 draft and we dig in and we talk about the players that were selected and, again, what to expect moving forward, I want to talk about some of the things that happened in that 2017 offseason and into the regular season, and then we'll take a look at the draft that coincides with that year. So 2017 for the 49ers was the first year of Lynch and Shanahan. That was their first year in San Francisco. Obviously, Shanahan got the job first, reached back, grabbed John Lynch out of the announcer's booth. His first move coming in as general manager was to reach out, grab Adam Peters from Denver. And remember, they crossed paths in Denver. All right. And that's how Lynch knew about Adam Peters. So he reached in, grabbed him, brought him to San Francisco. The rest is history. So the 49ers went 2-14 in 2016. That was the lone season of Chip Kelly, the Chipster in San Francisco. He went 2-14. They immediately fired him. He was one and done. And so they owned the number 2 overall pick in the 2017 NFL draft. Now, they ultimately traded back one spot, if you recall, in that 2017 draft from 2 to 3. The Bears were sitting at 3. The The 49ers were at 2 initially. The Bears wanted to go up to number 2 to get their quarterback. It turned out to be Mitchell Trubisky. Mama named him Mitchell. I'm going to call him Mitchell. Remember, that was a draft with Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes, et cetera, et cetera. They wanted Mitchell Trubisky. And so they moved back. They picked up a 3rd and a 4th in that same year's draft, 2017. And then they also got a 3rd round pick in the 2018 draft from that move. Okay. So they didn't have a quarterback when they got to San Francisco, but Kyle Shanahan had 2 quarterbacks in mind, but there was one guy in particular that he really wanted to get, which is why they avoided quarterbacks in the draft altogether. It wasn't because they didn't like Mahomes or Watson or Mitchell Trubisky. It was because now they didn't love any of those quarterbacks, clearly, because if they did, they just would have taken one of them. But Kyle wanted Kirk Cousins, if you recall. And Cousins was still young. He still was going into the prime of his career. It was his last year in Washington, 2017, if you recall. And they picked up the phone and they called the bozos that were currently in Washington at the time. And the Prince of Darkness, Bruce Allen, was the one that picked up the damn phone. And he said, hey, or they said, hey, look, man, you got a guy that we want. I know we've had our differences in the past, but we'll give you a 1st round pick for Kirk Cousins. We'll give you the number 2 overall pick for him. Let me get my guy. And Washington said, nope, not doing any business with you, and hung up the phone. You know, when you think about those types of things, it just makes you want to vomit. Makes you want to strangle the guys that were in the building because they were so negligent. But it also makes you want to vomit that we could have had the number 2 overall pick and we could have taken one of those quarterbacks and moved on from Kirk because we weren't going to sign him anyway. And we could have got our quarterback. Not to say that we would have had the foresight to draft Mahomes, probably would have ruined him anyway. Not to say we would have had the foresight to draft Deshaun Watson. Probably would have picked Mitchell Trubisky and he would have sucked ass. Probably would have been what we would have done. But at least we would have had the opportunity. That would have been a lot smarter than doing what we ultimately did, which was essentially letting Kirk leave for a 3rd round compensatory pick and then trading that 3rd round compensatory pick essentially for and Kendall Fuller for Alex Smith. Great move. So, yeah. Not the smartest thing in the world, but that was the guys that were running the operation at the time. So you see why we sucked ass for so many years. Anyway, I digress. So they wanted Kirk Cousins. Kyle wanted Kirk Cousins. Couldn't get him. So he didn't draft a quarterback that year. So they just took their lumps. They started off that season 0-8, did the 49ers. It was all bad. And they ultimately traded a 2nd round pick right before the trade deadline on October 30th for Jimmy Garoppolo. And the rest is history, right? Garoppolo comes in, wins the final 5 games of the season. And everybody's thinking, here come the 49ers. Here comes Jimmy Garoppolo. We'll get to that a little bit later on. But to continue with the offseason in 2017, they signed 25 free agents that offseason. So again, keep in mind, new regime comes in. What does that mean? You're turning over the roster. My prediction for this team was, let me see, I might have it in this same notebook. I said Washington was going to sign 11 free agents this offseason. That's not even close to what the number's probably going to be. It's probably going to be more in the 20s, to be honest with you. It's probably going to be like 22, 23. Like, they're really going to turn this roster over. Trust me when I tell you this. So the 49ers signed 25 free agents that offseason. 12 of them, of the 25, were 1-year deals. 8 of the 25 were 2-year deals. 1 was a 3-year deal. 2 were 4-year deals. and 2 were 5-year deals. So again, they didn't invest heavily in many of the guys that they signed. 20 out of the 25 were either 1 or 2-year deals. And that's what you're going to see. And I talked about the Texans and what they did when they started to turn over their roster. And it was a steady diet. Every year I would do free agent signings. And when the Texans went to their new general manager, they had the most free agent signings every year for the last 3 years as they continue to turn over their roster. And it was a steady diet of 1 and 2-year deals. Most of them were 1-year deals. And they would sign like 30 guys, 25, 30 guys. It was crazy. And then remember, a lot of these are 1-year deals. So those guys are gone the next year. So now you got to do it all over again, right? As you continue to turn the roster over. So 25 free agents. They traded a 5th-round pick to the Lions for offensive guard Laken Tomlinson. Now, I want you to keep these trades in mind, not necessarily who they traded for. Just think about the trades and them wheeling and dealing. So they get there the first year, they trade for an offensive lineman as they look to try to build up the front in front of whomever's going to play quarterback, open up rush lanes. All these things are important for a Kyle Shanahan offense, especially in the run game. So they trade a 5th-rounder for a former 1st-round pick. If you recall, Laken Tomlinson was taken in the 1st round by the Detroit Lions out of Duke. So they're trading a 5th-rounder for a guy that didn't necessarily work out the way the Lions had intended. And they see talent here, why the guy went 1st round, and they trade a 5th-round pick for him, right? Key undrafted free agents, okay? This is another place where we see the talents of Adam Peters shine through. Undrafted free agents, okay? So there were 3 in particular in this class of free agents, undrafted free agents that they signed. They had it was like a list of probably 12, but these were the 3 guys that stood out. Wide receiver Kendrick Bourne, who played 4 years for the 49ers and then left in free agency in the offseason of 2022 to go to New England. He was a really good receiver for the 49ers, which is what got him the deal in New England for the Patriots, and he's been the Patriots' best wide receiver. Quarterback Nick Mullins. Now, if you recall, a number of injury-filled seasons, specifically to the quarterback and Jimmy Garoppolo, led us to see way more Nick Mullins than any of us wanted to see on primetime television. That said, Nick Mullins played well enough that he's remained in the league. He's now in Minnesota, backing up Kirk Cousins with the Vikings. They had a number of guys come through Minnesota this year. They wanted to see Dobbs because Mullins got hurt. So they went and got Dobbs, and they wanted to see Kellen the rookie from BYU, Jaron Hall. They gave him a shot, and then they ultimately went back to Nick Mullins, right? But he's still in the league, right? Because he's a good football. He's a quality NFL backup quarterback. And then Matt Breida, running back Matt Breida, played 4 years for the 49ers, or maybe it was 3 years for the 49ers. And then they ultimately traded him. We'll get to that a little bit later on. So 3 key undrafted free agents that, and this is Adam Peters' expertise here. These are the diamonds in the rough that Adam Peters is largely responsible for as you get to the back end of the roster. So now let's dig into this 2017 draft. You have all the information that you need. Let's talk about what they were able to do in this draft. So as you can see, they've got 2 first-round picks due the San Francisco 49ers. And they take Solomon Thomas. They trade back from number 2 overall, go to number 3, and they take Solomon Thomas, the defensive end out of Stanford. That turned out to be an epic fail for them. Now, he's still in the league, still a solid contributor, plays for the Jets right now, but he didn't, again, much like how we felt about Chase Young, when you spend a top 5 pick on a defensive end or defensive lineman, you just expect tons of production and this guy to be like Myles Garrett, pretty much. And that wasn't what Solomon Thomas was. And really what he was drafted to be was an undersized interior offensive lineman that you could kick inside. He could play defensive end for you, but you can kick inside on obvious passing downs. And he was supposed to win against guards and centers because of his quickness and the advantage that he was supposed to have when you reduce him inside. It just never came to fruition. All right, Reuben Foster, we all know the legal issues that he had off the field. That really stunted his growth as a football player. He also had injuries on the field, but he could have overcome the injuries had he just stayed out of trouble off the field. He got a bad rap, and once that rap kind of stuck, there really was no going back. And so his career ended pretty abruptly and prematurely due to the issues off the field and then injuries, right? We know all too well because we signed him here, and he ripped his knee into shreds and never played a single down for the Commanders. So Ahkello Witherspoon was a 3rd-round pick. I loved him coming out of Colorado. He never really lived up to the expectations the 49ers set on him. He ended up going to Atlanta, played quality ball for them, and then he had his best. He went to Pittsburgh for a year, and then now he's with the Los Angeles Rams, coincidentally enough, and he started for them and had the best season of his career for the Rams this year. So ended up being a really good pick, just not for them, right? CJ Beathard, or as I like to call him, CJ Beathard, solid backup quarterback, 3rd-round pick they spent out of Iowa. Reminds me a lot, not in terms of the way he plays, but just played a lot of college ball to CJ Beathard. And so reminds me a lot of Brock Purdy in terms of them getting a guy that played a ton of college football. And Kyle likes these types of players. It's why they drafted Kirk Cousins. Remember the story, Mike Shanahan drafted Robert Griffin III, and Kyle thought he wasn't going to be able to get his guy. And Mike goes to Kyle and says, "Hey, do you still want your guy?" And Kyle's like, "Yeah, but we already drafted a quarterback." He's like, "It doesn't matter. Do you still want your guy or not?" He's like, "Yeah, I still want my guy. If he's there in the 4th round, we'll take him." Kirk was there. They took him. Kirk played a lot of college football, right? Kyle likes quarterbacks that play a lot of college football, especially if he's going to groom them as one of his backups. Joe Williams, running back out of Utah, he had some injury issues, never really took to the NFL, unfortunately. He had some talent, but injuries beset his career. George Kittle, obviously 5th-round pick, one of the jewels of this draft, not one of the jewel of this draft, and one of the best picks that Adam Peters has on his resume. As you get to day 3 of the draft, the 4th, the 5th, the 6th, the 7th round, now you're really relying on your scouts. You're relying on the guys that do the dirty work, who are hands-on, like Adam Peters. That's when you start relying on them. The 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, 4th round, the 3rd round, those first 2 days of the draft, you're spending a lot of time on those players because guess what? These are the guys that you expect to come in and have day 1 impacts, right? Those day 3 guys, you're not spending as much time watching tape. That's what the scouts are for. That's what Adam Peters is for, your assistant GM and guys that are really, really well-versed in the school of scouting. This is when you rely on them very heavily, and Kittle was a monster pick. 5th round out of Iowa. We know what he's turned into and what his career has been. Trent Taylor, small wide receiver that they drafted to be more of a punt returner, slot guy out of La Tech. He was solid for them, but he never was what they were hoping. But again, he's a 5th-round pick. DJ Jones turned out to be a really good defensive lineman that they drafted in the 6th round out of Mississippi. So DJ Jones morphed into one of their best rotational defensive tackles. And at one point, he was a starter for them. And you couldn't run on San Francisco, and he was part of the reason why you couldn't run on them. He turned out to be a hell of a 6th-round pick out of Ole Miss. And that's another one of those gems you get late in the draft from Adam Peters. Peter T never really materialized in the NFL nor in San Francisco. And Adrian Colbert actually played solid football, was a good backup safety for them. Core special teamer. And in a pinch, if you needed him to play, he could come in the game and give you quality snaps. And the drop-off wouldn't be as drastic. So all around solid draft, especially when you hit the way that they did in the 5th and the 6th rounds. Really didn't do any damage the first 2 days. CJ Beathard actually ended up being a quality pick for them. He started way more games than they probably ever imagined he would for them. And like I said, he's still in the league. He's in Jacksonville right now. And he came in and helped them in a game. I don't think they won that game, though. They lost to Cincinnati on a Monday night. But remember, Beathard came in and drove them down the field and took them to overtime. So if you recall. So he's still in the league and he's still playing well. But solid draft in 2017, right? So you get to 2018. So that's the next draft. So just recapping the season in 17, they went 6-10 that year. Started 0-8. They traded after the 0-8 start. They traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. They got him up to speed. It took them another 3 games to get him up to speed. They won a game. They lost a game, and then they had a bye week. They come off the bye. He starts, and he wins all 5 games the remainder of the season. So I think they lost one more game. They started 0-8. They lost the game to go to 0-9. Then they had a win. Then they had another loss, and then the bye. And then he comes off the bye, and he starts and wins 5 straight games. And they finished 6-10 that year. Everybody's excited. The networks go crazy. I remember this like it was yesterday because the 49ers, who sucked ass for the last 2 years, 3 years really, they had been awful. Going back to the Mike Nolan days. Was it Mike Nolan? I might be tripping. I don't know if it was, I might be going a little too far back. That might have been Mike Singletary or somebody. But they sucked ass. Then they sucked again with Chip Kelly, even worse. And then they brought in Kyle and they stunk that year. But the networks went crazy because the 49ers won 5 straight to finish up. And they got 5 primetime games that next year. And I remember it clear as day because Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt in the 3rd game against the Kansas City Chiefs in 2018. And the 49ers were on primetime television 5 times that year. And we had to sit through a combination of CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins playing in those games. It was horrible. Anyway, so you go to the 2018 season. Oh, and in 2017, even when they sucked the ass, 2 Pro Bowl players, no all pros, but they still had 2 guys make it to the Pro Bowl. We just had nobody, 0, zilch, zip, make it to anything. Pro Bowl, all pro, of course, none. If you don't have a Pro Bowl, you don't have an all pro, none of it. They had 2 Pro Bowlers in 2017. 2018 season, they go 4-12 in that season, 2018. All right. So it's not a great season again. And I talked about why already. They had some big injuries. Of course, they were really relying on Jimmy Garoppolo. He goes down week 3. The rest is history. Even with that said, they still managed to have 3 Pro Bowl players and 1 All-Pro on their squad. So again, they still got some really good players that they're accumulating as they turn over this roster, right? So they owned the 9th pick in the draft, going 6-10. So that earned them the 9th pick. They signed 14 more free agents. So the year prior, the first year of Kyle and John Lynch, 25 free agents. Now, not all 25 of those guys made the roster. Okay. Probably 16 of them made the roster out of the 25, 17, something like that. But again, it just goes to show you how many guys they brought in. The next year, 14 free agents were signed. Okay. 10 of them were on 1-year deals. One of them was on a 2-year deal. One of them was on a 3-year deal. One of them was on a 4-year deal. One of them was on a 5-year deal. So again, not heavy commitments to these guys. Of the 14, 11 of them were 10 of them were on 1-year deals. 11 of them were on either 1 or 2-year deals. So they weren't committing to it. Again, this is what you do when you're turning over a roster, which is what I'm trying to, make sure I over communicate to you that you're going to see a steady diet. You guys think we're going to go out here and be spending all kinds of money on these big priced free agents? You got another thing coming. It's going to be a steady diet of these 1-year deals, bringing in guys that they're familiar with from other places that they like, that they think can come in and help change the culture here, kind of establish what they're looking for in football players. That's what they're going to aim to do in year 1. And if it also culminates in winning, great. But the likelihood is we're going to take some lumps next year, but we're going to be highly competitive and we're going to win some football games, right? So key free agent, undrafted free agents, right? Key undrafted free agents in 2018. Tight end Ross Dwelly, who's still in San Francisco. Cornerback Emmanuel Mosley, who played some really good football for the 49ers, which landed him a free agent deal with the Detroit Lions, which is where he is right now. And running back Jeff Wilson, speedy Jeff Wilson that played some good football for the 49ers. He is now in Miami, if I'm not mistaken. He followed their running game coordinator, Mike McDaniel, to Miami. And that's, I think, I think, if I'm not mistaken, McDaniel reached back and traded for Jeff Wilson, like 6th, 7th round pick or whatever for Jeff Wilson. So he's now in San Francisco. But again, another gem that they were able to unearth as undrafted free agents. All right. So 3 of them in 17, another 3 quality undrafted free agents that help your football team moving forward. And not only just with their performance on the field and being able to hold down a roster spot and be productive in the role that they carved out for themselves, but also in turning around and giving you some draft capital. Some of these guys ended up being traded down the road. I just told you Jeff Wilson ended up getting traded. Matt Breida ended up getting traded. When you find an undrafted guy and in 2-3 years later down the road, you're able to trade him, you essentially flipped a guy that you didn't spend a draft pick on for a draft pick down the road in the future. Do you know how valuable that is? Anyway, also something to note, the 49ers traded a 7th round pick for offensive tackle Sean Coleman with the Browns. Sean Coleman, if you guys recall, was a 3rd round pick by the Cleveland Browns, tackle out of Auburn, ridiculously athletic, had everything you were looking for, but dealt with injuries, and the technique wasn't always the cleanest. But the dude was an athlete. He had the size, he had the length, everything you were looking for. And so Kyle was excited about getting his hands on him. The problem was he got to San Francisco, immediately got injured, and never really played any snaps for the 49ers in 2 years. But that's no here nor there. So now we can get into the 2018 draft for the 49ers and talk about what they were able to do. As you can see, this was another big draft for them. So in the first round, told you they had the 9th overall pick via the 6-10 record from the year prior. They drafted tackle Mike McGlinchey out of Notre Dame. And again, you see what they did. They came in immediately, traded for Laken Tomlinson at guard. So that was a piece. All right. Drafted Mike McGlinchey in the first round the following year. Also traded for Sean Coleman, tackle. And so they were trying to build that offensive line as they still were trying to put the pieces together with all the skill guys. They didn't have all the skill guys that they wanted. They went out and signed guys like Pierre Garçon to big deals and guys like Marquise Goodwin and things of that nature. But they hadn't started drafting guys yet. at the skill positions. They were still trying to build up, you know, the offensive line, the defensive line, the linebackers, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the first skill guys that they really spent high draft capital on was Dante Pettis, the wide receiver out of Washington. He never materialized into what they wanted him to be. He was a big disappointment in the second round. It happens, right? Call him De'Ami Brown. It's essentially what he was for them. Supposed to be a deep threat, a guy that could do a little bit of everything, but mostly take the top off the defense. That never really materialized for Dante Pettis in a 49ers uniform. Never really panned out there. Fred Warner obviously has turned into the model inside linebacker in the NFL. They spent the third round pick on him. You can't begin to quantify the amount of residual kickback they've gotten from that selection. I mean, the return on investment, the ROI there is through the roof. He is the best, to me, the best middle linebacker in football right now. So take it for what it's worth. Tavarius Moore ended up being a solid, safety for them, depth guy. When pressed into action, he would come in and give out quality snaps. Nothing major. Kentavious Street ended up being a quality defensive lineman for them. So that turned out to work well in their favor. DJ Reed, I don't think he ever really caught on in San Francisco the way that he should have, but he ended up being really good. Really, really, really good. I think he really started to show how good he could be if I'm thinking about the same player in Seattle. I think he went to Seattle and really started to play well for the Seahawks. And that got the attention of the Jets. And remember, when DJ Reed was drafted, he was drafted in San Francisco when who was the defensive coordinator? Robert Saleh. So Saleh goes to the Jets and he reunites himself with DJ Reed. The rest is history. He's playing excellent ball across from Sauce Gardner. DJ Reed is a hell of a football player. Marcel Harris, Julian Taylor. I remember Julian Taylor out of Temple, thinking he could be the next, I thought he could be like the next kind of Swiss Army knife interior defensive lineman. This dude was like 6'7", 300 and probably like 5 pounds or whatever. But he was so his build was so different. I remember thinking, man, if this kid develops, they might have something. It never happened. Richie James ended up being a solid receiver for them, but never really gave them what they thought they could get out of him. Punt returner, slot receiver. He was solid. Again, had his moments, but nothing major. But if you recall, Richie James dug in our ass, just last year with the Giants, 2022, biggest game of the season, biggest game at FedEx Field since the 2012 season finale against Dallas. It's the biggest regular season game since 2012 regular season finale against Dallas. But probably the biggest game at FedEx since the 2015 playoff game against the Packers. I mean, you could say the 2020 Packers playoff game against the Bucks, but nobody was there. It was COVID. So biggest regular season game since 2012, and we couldn't cover Richie James. Or rather, Bobby McCain couldn't cover Richie James. But whatever. We kept putting Bobby McCain on Richie James, and he kept cooking him, and he kept getting open. And I made the statement. I remember making the statement. If Daniel Jones would have just thrown the ball to Richie James on every single third or fourth down, they would not have had any fourth downs the entire night. Because he was open the entire night. And when he went to him, he caught everything, and he was always wide open. And if he'd just stuck with that, they would have never had a fourth down that they would have had to try to go for. But he's now in Kansas City with the Chiefs, and we'll see if he makes some plays with them. He's their punt returner right now, and he's also a guy that they occasionally throw the football to. So that's the 2019 or 18 draft, rather. And as you can see, they got Mike McGlinchey out of that draft, huge contributor until he left in free agency this past year to go to Denver. Fred Warner, we already know what he is, all-pro. If this pace that he's on keeps up, he'll end up being a Hall of Famer when his career is done. DJ Reed, Kentavious Street are really good players, or had been really good players. DJ Reed has morphed into a really good corner in this league, and Richie James is still in the league as a punt returner and a slot receiver. So on to 2019. This was the year where everything kind of fell into place for them. They went 13-3. As we know, made it all the way to the Super Bowl, lost to the Kansas City Chiefs. They were up in that game 20-7 with 7 minutes left in the ball game, and ended up losing the game 31-20. So things obviously went off the deep end for them, or it might have been 20-10 with 7 minutes to go. Things obviously, it was because they scored 3 touchdowns in the final 7 minutes, but they had the game right where they wanted it. And then all hell broke loose. Anyway, they ended up having 4 Pro Bowlers and 3 All-Pro players in that 2019 season. So it took them 3 years to establish themselves, which is what I'm trying to convey to y'all. I've been trying to tell y'all. It took Houston 3 years. It took Detroit 3 years. It took this 49ers team that Adam Peters helped construct 3 years to get to where they ultimately wanted to be. A lot of y'all have this fallacy in your mind because what if you watching Houston, but again, you didn't see the things that led up to that. You only saw the final product. That is not how this works. Okay? That is not how this works. However, I'm not going to tell you that we can't have this ridiculous turnaround. I'm just telling you, highly unlikely. So year 3, which is what I've been telling you, year 3 in Houston is what you see now. Year 3 in Detroit is what you see now. That's what happened in San Francisco. Year 3, 13-3, all the way to the Super Bowl. 4 Pro Bowlers, 3 All-Pros. They started with 2 Pro Bowlers, no All-Pros. Now, by year 3, 4 Pro Bowlers, 3 All-Pros. They owned the second pick in the draft because they were asked clearly in 2018 at 4-12. So they had the second pick overall in the draft in 2019. They had their key undrafted free agents that year. Linebacker Azeez Al-Shire, we all know that he turned out to be a key reserve and in many instances started for them and played starter snaps, even though he wasn't a starter for them, and ultimately left in free agency this year to go to the Titans on a 1-year deal. Somebody brought him up as a guy that could potentially sign here. I wouldn't rule that out. Adam Peters knows him intimately. He had a really good season in Tennessee this year. I would assume the Titans would like him back. Remember, he went to Tennessee. Why? Because Rand Carthen came from where? San Francisco, right? They couldn't get Adam Peters last year. So what did they do? They went to the guy that was below Adam Peters. That was Rand Carthen, and they made him their GM. Okay. And he brought Azeez Al-Shire with him. 1-year deal, which is what you're going to see. Again, Rand Carthen, what did he do? Go to Tennessee, turn the roster over, right? A lot of guys left. A lot of guys got deals elsewhere. A lot of 1-year deals, which is what Azeez Al-Shire signed. We're going to see a lot of that here in Washington. So Azeez Al-Shire, defensive lineman Kevin Givens, who has been a key reserve for the 49ers since they found him in 2019. He's still on their roster right now as a key reserve. That's what I'm talking about, right? Guy from 20. I don't even know if we have anybody left from the 2019 draft on our team. Montez Sweat was a first-round pick that year. Dwayne Haskins was a first-round pick that year. Both of them are gone. May Dwayne rest in paradise. But I don't know if we have any players left other than Terry McLaurin from that 2019 draft. Y'all might correct me. Tell me that there's a 6th or a 7th rounder still here. Humor me. They got undrafted guys from 2019 that are still on their roster. We barely have any guys that we drafted still on the team from that far back, right? Same with the 2018 draft, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I digress. They signed 6 free agents. So you can see the number of free agents coming down significantly because they're starting to mold this roster into what they want it to be. 2 one-year deals, 3 2-year deals, 1 4-year deal of the 6. All right. So they traded a 2nd-round pick in the 2020 draft for D Ford that year. All right. So they traded for D Ford in 2019 in that offseason. And I don't know if you recall what prompted that, but D Ford had the big offsides penalty. He was playing for the Chiefs. If you recall, back in 2018, that was the first year of Mahomes starting in Kansas City. They go to the AFC Championship game. They're playing the Patriots, Tom Brady, all of that good stuff. And they're in overtime, or they have a chance to stop them in regulation, and win the game. It's 4th and 5, if I'm not mistaken. D Ford jumps off sides. Pass is incomplete. Would have been turnover on down, and he didn't need to jump off sides. Not like Brady hard counted him or anything. He just jumped off sides. All right. They get the first down because of the offsides penalty. They go down, they score. Game goes to overtime. Patriots get the ball first, drive it the length of the field, score a touchdown, win the game. Mahomes never sees it. That was part 1 of why the rule got changed. Then part 2 was, Josh Allen not seeing a football against that same Chiefs team, 2 years later. And then the rule finally changed where each team gets possession of the football in overtime in the postseason. So, they get D Ford for a 2nd-round pick because the Chiefs were done with him after that happened. Emmanuel Sanders also was traded for during the season. So similar to what they did with Jimmy Garoppolo back in 18 or 17, rather. They could sense that they were a receiver away from winning the Super Bowl. They started this 2019 season 8-0. And so they knew how good they were, but they knew they were missing that piece. They went and traded for Emmanuel Sanders. He was excellent for them. Gave up a 3rd and a 4th-round pick in the 2020 draft. All right. So now, also, an undrafted guy from that 2019 draft, undrafted free agent, Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles. This is a guy that essentially has taken the place of Azeez Al-Shire as that backup linebacker role that comes in, gives them quality snaps, can get after the quarterback, athletic. They can use him in a number of different roles. So, again, finding a gem, a diamond in the rough, someone undrafted that comes in, he's still on their team. And because they allowed Azeez Al-Shire to walk, they had a guy already in Demetrius Flannigan-Fowles who could step in. I mean, that's what you do when you've got a good system, right? When you got a guy like Adam Peters that can find you these gems you can maneuver, right? So now we get to that 19 draft, and this is where I feel like they rounded their roster into shape, and this was the foundation. So they already had Kittle. They already had Fred Warner now. They were really starting to build the core of their roster here with Nick Bosa, number 1, their 1st-round pick, number 2 overall. Deebo Samuel in the 2nd round out of South Carolina, that same draft. So those are the 2 guys that make this entire draft everything, but they weren't done, right? They missed on Jalen Hurd, and I knew what Kyle was trying to do there. Kid out of Baylor, former running back, turn receiver, you know, they saw some real positional flex in him. I knew you'd find that funny. And he thought he could do some things with him. He started as a quarterback, then he was a running back, then he was a wide receiver. So they thought they could do some things with him. And it just didn't happen. It didn't happen. Mitch Wisnowski ended up being a really good punter for the 49ers. So that's a good pick in the 4th round, even though I always tell people the cardinal sin is when you pick a specialist before the 5th round. I don't give a shit what you do. Do not pick a punter, a long snapper, or a field goal kicker before the 5th round. They committed a cardinal sin. They got away with it. Good for them. But generally, you don't get away with these things. Okay, don't do it. I don't give a shit what you do 5th round or later. Knock yourself out. You can draft 3 punters, 3 kickers, 3 long snappers if you like. Just don't do it before the 5th round. Dre Greenlaw in the 5th round out of Arkansas. Killer pick. Absolutely home run in the 5th round. So there they go. You know, day 3 again, killing it, kicking ass. Caden Smith, tight end out of Stanford. Solid pick. Never really turned into anything that they thought he would or could be. And they did a lot of good things at the tight end position with guys that have come in and really helped them. Justin School ended up being really solid as a swing tackle for them. Guy that could come in. You don't want him playing, but if he had to, you could do a lot worse in the league than Justin School as a 6th round pick. And then Tim Harris corner, nothing. So that was a very impactful and influential draft. That 3rd draft, you couple that with the undrafted guys that I talked about. So Azeez Al-Shire, defensive lineman Kevin Givens, and linebacker Demetrius Flanagan Fowles. You couple those 3 with Boza, Deebo Samuel, Mitch Wisnowski, Dre Greenlaw. That's a hell of a draft. That's a hell of an incoming crop of players that really helped shape and mold what the 49ers turned into. Part of the reason they went 13-3 that year was because of this particular draft and some of the things they had done in the previous drafts. So you could see where this thing was heading. 13-3, go to the Super Bowl. They think they're a few players, away now. Really, probably quarterback. They're thinking to themselves at this point, we need to get the quarterback. Like, they could have won that game if Jimmy Garoppolo didn't miss Emmanuel Sanders wide open inside the 5 on a deep ball that probably would have been a touchdown if he hits him on the money. But even if he gets tackled, it's probably 1st and goal at the 7. And they got a chance to take the lead. The score was 24-20 at that time. You score that touchdown, you probably win the game because I want to say it was less than 2 minutes to go in the game when he missed. But that's nor here nor there. Anyway, they gave up a lot to get to 13-3 and almost win a Super Bowl. Hence, if you look at this 2020 draft, it's, first of all, not a lot of players. It's incredibly spread out. As you can see, there's no 2nd, there's no 3rd, there's no 4th. And they had to make the most of what they had. Now, I've watched several Adam Peters interviews and him talking to someone from the 49ers organization, them getting to know him when he was a scout, getting to know him. He always talks about the 2020 draft with reverence. This is his draft. This is his baby. This is the one where you could tell he was so proud of what they were able to do, all the maneuvering that they ultimately did to get what they did. And if you look at the draft, all 5 of those guys made their team and have been impactful in San Francisco. Javon Kinlaw has been the biggest disappointment. He's the 1st pick of that draft class. He's been the biggest disappointment out of all the guys on that list. That tells you how well they did. When the guy that you drafted first is the guy that is probably giving you the least out of all the guys that are on this list. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about why he was so proud of 2020. This will be the last draft that we really dig into from a season, off-season standpoint. And then the rest of them will kind of, because the rest of them kind of too early to decide. I think you can do a lot of good things with the 2021, 2022, 2023, kind of too early to decide on these players at this current juncture. But by 2020, they had built this thing into what they wanted it to be. Now, they didn't have a great season. They went 6-10 because of injuries. Remember, Nick Bosa burst onto the NFL scene as a rookie in 2019, won Defensive Rookie of the Year, then tore his ACL in week 2 at MetLife against the Jets. And they had a myriad of injuries. Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. I think Fred Warner got hurt. They had a bunch of injuries. Kittle got hurt that year. They were the walking wounded. They lost the most players to the IR in the NFL that year with 18. So needless to say that the fact that they even won 6 games was a miracle given their state with all the injuries. That said, they still managed to have 3 Pro Bowlers. They still managed to have 1 All-Pro, right? They had the 31st pick in the draft, clearly because they were the runners-up in the Super Bowl. But as you look, they had 2 first-round picks. Neither one of them was the 31st overall pick. So let's get in. This is why Adam Peters was so proud of this particular draft, right? Because they had to wheel and deal, and he was a part of this. They were working the phones. They were moving back. They were moving up. They were grabbing this guy. They were trading this player to get this, to get that, and it all worked out for them. So let's talk about it. So they traded, and I know this is going to stick in some of your craws, right? They traded their third round pick in 2020 and a 5th rounder in 2021 for offensive tackle Trent Williams from Washington. Wow, 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 wow. All he's done is gone on to be like a 5-time All-Pro player for them in San Francisco. That's all he's done, man. Never mind Hall of Famer, first ballot. All he's done is gone on to be the best tackle in football. That's it. Anyway, so they don't have a 3rd round pick, which is what you see there. They don't have a 3rd rounder. So they had already traded a 3rd and a 4th rounder for Emmanuel Sanders in the 2020 draft. So they had a compensatory 3rd, they had their 3rd, and then they had a 4th. All of them are already wiped out. Traded the compensatory 3rd to Washington, and their 3rd to the Broncos the year prior, and their 4th to the Broncos the year prior. So then they to kind of offset some of the damage done, they knew they couldn't re-sign both defensive tackles that they had on the roster already. In back-to-back years, if you recall, in 15 and 16, they drafted DeForest Buckner in 15 and Eric Armstead in 16. So they were both Oregon defensive tackles, former teammates, drafted them in back-to-back years, similar to what we did with Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen. They did it in San Francisco first with DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead. So they knew they couldn't re-sign both of them. DeForest Buckner had the most value, and he was going to cost the most. They felt like they could get a reasonable deal done, which they did with Eric Armstead. So they moved on from Buckner, traded him to the Colts, got a 1st-round pick for him. He signed like a 5-year, 6-year, $120 million deal. They couldn't afford that. They ended up signing Armstead to like a 5-year, $87 million deal, something like that. So saved themselves some money, kept the guy that they knew they could re-sign, and kept the party going, and got a 1st-round pick in the process. And then they figured, we'll just draft Javon Kinlaw to take his place. So it's like we didn't lose anything, except Javon Kinlaw couldn't stay healthy, and he wasn't DeForest Buckner. But that's nor here nor there. So they had that 13th overall pick. They trade back one spot with Tampa. If you recall, the Buccaneers got Brady that offseason in 2020. The first thing that they had to do, the first order of business, was protect Tom Brady at all costs. Okay. So what did they do? There was 5 tackles in that 2020 draft. If you were searching for a tackle, there were 5. You better go get one of these 5, because if you don't, you're screwed. Well, the Bucs got scared because the final of those 5 tackles was on the board. And if San Francisco allowed somebody else to leapfrog them, they wouldn't get one of the tackles. Tristan Wirfs, as we all know, turned out to be that 5th and final tackle. The Buccaneers traded up one spot, and in order to do so, they gave up let's see. They gave up a 4th round pick to do that. 49ers traded back one spot, gave up their 7th, but gained a 4th round pick in the process. So they felt good about that. Then they turned around, right? They drafted Javon Kinlaw, but then they turned around and they got to the back end of the first, and they're like, yo, he fell in love with what he calls a baller, right? So any receiver that's a playmaker, that's a big time, playmaker at the receiver, he calls him a baller. Just really any playmaker, but at receiver, he's like, I need a dude. He calls them a dude or a baller, right? I need a dude at receiver. He signed Pierre Garçon in free agency, and he was solid for him, but it didn't give the energy that he was looking for. He needed a dude. Deebo Samuel was already there, but you saw how they were using him, and he's performing well for them, but they needed a guy that stretched the field vertically, a guy that could work all portions of the field, all levels, and be that guy. And they fell in love with Brandon Ayuk. So what do? This is why Adam Peters loved this draft in particular, because they had to shake and move. They didn't have a bunch of draft capital. They had to make all these moves. They fell in love with a player. They give up their first rounder, so 31 overall. They give up 31. The 4th rounder that they just got in that Bucs deal to trade back one spot, they give that up, and a 5th rounder to Minnesota for the 25th pick overall in the draft. They spend that, as you can see, on Brandon Ayuk. All right. So that's a big time trade. You gave up a lot, but you're getting the guy that initially it didn't work out. The first 2 years, Ayuk was in the doghouse. He wasn't playing well. They had little to no confidence in him. In year 3, a light bulb went off. He started to play well, and he's morphed into the guy that we see now, and he's playing at a very, very high level. Also, some key moves made in this draft. They traded Matt Breida to the Dolphins for a 5th round pick. That 5th round pick became Colton McKivitz. Colton McKivitz is their starting right tackle right now. Why? Because they let Mike McGlinchey leave in free agency. You can't pay everybody. The tackle that they spent a 1st round pick on in 2018 left in free agency in 2022. Who takes his spot? The 5th round pick tackle that they got via a trade of Matt Breida, who was an undrafted free agent back in 2017. That's how you win in this league. Undrafted guy, you flip him for a 5th round pick 3 years later that turns into your starting right tackle 5 years later. Look at that, right? Or turns into your starting tackle in 2022, which is 3 years after he was drafted as a 5th round pick. Boy, that's beautiful. Not done yet. They traded wide receiver Marquise Goodwin and a 6th rounder, which was 210 overall, to the Eagles for the Eagles' 6th round pick, which was 190. So they gave up a player and their 6th rounder to move up 20 spots essentially in the 6th round to take Charlie Werner, who turned out to be a really good 3rd tight end for them and is still in San Francisco as their third tight end. Again, that's how you win. All right. Then, lastly, they traded linebacker Eli Harold to the Detroit Lions for a conditional 7th-round pick. That conditional 7th-round pick turned into Jauan Jennings, who is a key contributor for this 49ers football team. He is their third best receiver on that football team. Fourth best option when you fifth when you factor in Kittle and Christian McCaffrey. But when they go 3 deep at receiver, he's a guy you have to worry about. Remember the Eagles game where he took the defender, grabbed his face, essentially not grabbed his face mask, but literally took his head like a basketball, palmed that bitch, threw his ass like yesterday's trash out of bounds, and then ran for a touchdown. That's Jauan Jennings. Big physical receiver out of Tennessee. They got him with a 7th-round pick, a conditional 7th-round pick that they traded away a player in Eli Harold and got from Detroit, and they turned it into Jauan Jennings. That's how you win. They had nothing in that draft because they had given it all away in the pursuit of a Super Bowl, in pursuit of a chip in 2019. They gave up all this draft capital. They gave up even more capital to get Brandon Ayuk. They had nothing left. No second, no thirds, no fourth, nothing. And they made all of these moves, and it netted them essentially 4 draft picks that they did not have. A number 1 for Ayuk, the second number 1 that year, a 5th that they didn't have in Colton McKivitz, a 6th that they didn't have for Charlie Werner, a 7th for Jauan Jennings that they didn't have. And all of these players are still on the 49ers roster as we speak. And Ayuk, McKivitz are starters, and Jauan Jennings and Werner are still key contributors in their roles. Chef's kiss. Lastly, undrafted free agents in that 2020 draft. Running back JaMychal Hasty, who now plays for the Patriots, and running back Salvon Ahmed. I love saying that name. Salvon Ahmed, who plays for the Miami Dolphins. He's a speedster running back out of Washington. So they continue to churn out the undrafteds. That was a hell of a draft, even though it's only 5 players. Very impactful draft. And it was a lot of shaking and moving, which is why Adam Peters is so proud of that 2020 draft. So now we can get to the last 3 drafts. We'll run through these quickly. Not going to spend a ton of time on these. 2021 season, 49ers went 10-7. Went back to the NFC Championship game. 7 Pro Bowlers. So what I was trying to explain to you, by 2020, their roster was pretty much intact. Now they're hunting for a chip at this point. They need a quarterback, though. That's the only thing that they're missing. They know they've got a roster that can win. They're not sure that Jimmy Garoppolo is good enough to take them where they want to go. So now they got to do something about it, which prompts them to do what you see in 2021. They went 10-7, lost in the NFC Championship game. Why? Because Garoppolo is ass, right? All he had to do was, all they really had to do was have their safety, Jaquiski Tart, catch the damn football. It was a punt that Matthew Stafford threw up there. Or was it Jared Goff? It was Jared Goff, excuse me. Jared Goff threw up there. And well, it wasn't Jared Goff. It was Matthew Stafford. They won the Super Bowl that year. All you had to do was catch a punt. And he didn't catch it, obviously. And the rest is history. They lose. So now they're looking for a quarterback. What was it? Am I mixing up my years? 2020. They didn't make the playoffs. It was 2021 that they went to the NFC Championship game. Oh, yeah, I'm talking about the right season. 2021. They went to the NFC Championship game, and Jaquiski Tart didn't catch the interception, but Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't great. And there were opportunities that were left on the field, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, 7 Pro Bowlers, 2 All-Pros. I mean, that roster is bussing at this point, right? So you look at the 2021 draft, and they knew it was they were hoping to do what the Chiefs did with Mahomes. They still had Garoppolo on the roster, as I just mentioned. They went to the NFC Championship game in 2021. But you draft his replacement. You have him kind of sit behind the veteran, learn as much as he can, and then you hope to roll him out the next year as the starter and do what the Chiefs did and never look back. That's what they were hoping to have happen. Clearly, it didn't happen. Really, the biggest reason why, and a lot of people who want us to pump the brakes on Adam Peters, this is where they go straight to, oh, he was a part of Trey Lance being selected at 3 overall. They traded up to get him. What a bust of a pick. That's the guy that you guys are putting all your faith in. And I'm like, yeah, that's the guy, right? Because that shit doesn't dissuade me. You're not going to hit a home run every single time that you swing the bat. And that includes the first round. I just told you they whiffed on Javon Kinlaw, right? They whiffed on Solomon Thomas. It ain't about the first or the second round picks. They whiffed on Dante Pettis in the second round, right? It ain't about those. It's about all the hits from undrafted guys to the 6th round, to the 7th round, to the 5th round in particular, 4th round hits, the 3rd round gems that they've unearthed. It's all about all the other guys that more than make up for the miss in the first round. You know why Javon Kinlaw doesn't hurt you as much? Because you found DJ Jones in the 5th round in 2017. Because you found Kevin Givens as an undrafted defensive lineman in 2019, right? That's why Javon Kinlaw doesn't hurt you as much. Other guys step up. Anyway, Trey Lance obviously didn't get it done for them. Various reasons as to why. I thought he was the perfect fit. And I would love to know if I could speak to Adam Peters. We all know that there was dissension amongst this decision because Kyle wanted Mac Jones. I want to believe Adam Peters and probably John Lynch too, because it had to be 2-1. It couldn't just be Adam Peters standing up and saying, you got to take Trey Lance. I think John Lynch was like, yo, in today's NFL, you need a guy like Lance, man. I'm sorry, Kyle. But I bet you Adam Peters was like, yo, Trey Lance is what we need. And I couldn't have agreed more. I would have been wrong as hell too, because the first time I laid eyes on Trey Lance, the year before when he was still a minor and I had no business even looking at him, I looked at his first game. The first time I laid eyes on him, I said, oh, that's Kyle Shanahan offense right there. He was under center. They were running outside zone, inside, outside zone. They were running heavy play action fake, and he was taking shots down the field. I said, if that ain't Kyle Shanahan offense, I don't know whose offense that is. He's the perfect fit. And I think they watched tape and they said, okay, yeah. And Kyle finally came around and was like, you guys are right. If we do this right, he's exactly what we need. He just couldn't stay healthy. And then that really stunted his growth, being injured his first 2 years when he was being given an opportunity. And I don't know where it comes. Brock Purdy, and the rest is history there. But Aaron Banks in that same 2021 draft, a guard out of Notre Dame. He's their starting left guard right now. Trey Sermon, 3rd round pick. Didn't work out in San Francisco out of Ohio State, but he ended up going to Indy over time. I think he ended up going to 2 or 3 other places, but he ended up in Indy this past year and actually played well for them in the opportunities that he did get. Ambry Thomas ended up being really good for them. That was a steal. That was a steal of a 3rd round pick. He's played well for them. Jalen Moore, tackle, depth. Diamonor Lenore has been one. I would put him in the same conversation with Dre Greenlaw in terms of a 5th round steal. He's been that valuable to them as a corner. Has Diamamor, I can never say his first name, Lenore. He's been really good. Really good. Same with Talanoa Hufanga, who got hurt this year, but we all saw what he turned into. He turned into a star last year. a bona fide star. You know, forcing turnovers. Is he always in the right place at the right time? No. Is he always doing his job? No. Does he over pursue? Is he over aggressive sometimes? Yeah. But does he know how to find the damn football? You damn right he does. So that's another hit in the 5th round. And then Elijah Mitchell, they love this kid out of Louisiana. Love this kid. And if not for injuries, I'm be honest with you. I know what Christian McCaffrey is, and Elijah Mitchell is not that. But I don't know if they trade for Christian McCaffrey if Elijah Mitchell just stays healthy. He kept getting injured. They loved him, but they couldn't wait on him to just be healthy. And they didn't have enough back. Like Trey Sermon didn't work out. They couldn't just wait on Elijah Mitchell. And they tried the next year, and we're going to go through this. So they tried the next year, and I'll tell you, 2022, they went 13-4, NFC Championship again. We all know what happened in the NFC Championship game. Brock Purdy gets injured. 7 Pro Bowlers, again, for the 2nd consecutive year. This time, they have 6 All-Pros in 2022. So they had 2 All-Pros in 21, 6. The number jumps to 6 in 2022. So the roster is ridiculous, right? Anyway, so that 2021 draft was awesome. Even with the Trey Lance miss. Banks, key contributor and starter. Ambry Thomas, key contributor. Lenore, starter and key contributor. Talanoa Hufanga, key contributor, starter. Elijah Mitchell, key contributor when healthy. He's no longer healthy, and they've replaced him with another running back. Probably another dude that they ended up getting off the scrap heap as an undrafted guy, but I digress. So we go to the 2022 draft. No 1st round pick because of the deal to get Trey Lance. They're still paying for that as we speak, right? So no 1st rounder in 2022, no 1st rounder in 2023 because of the deal to trade up to number 3 overall to get Trey Lance. So 2nd round pick, Drake Jackson out of USC. Solid pick there. He's continuing to develop and grow. They like what they're getting out of him. Terrion Davis-Price should ring a bell for you Commanders fans because we were interested in him at the running back position. I actually had him in my mock draft that year and as a guy that I thought Washington would take. And we all heard before and after the draft that had he been around during their pick in the 3rd round, they would have taken him. Instead, they took the running back out of Alabama, Brian Robinson. But they wanted Terrion Davis-Price. So that's a name that sticks out for me. And he hasn't been what they thought he was going to be either. Danny Gray, wide receiver, SMU, didn't work out for them. Hasn't, at least. Spencer Burford, it turned out to actually be a solid guy for them. Solid offensive lineman who has played a lot of football for them. In a reserve role, he started for them at times. Samuel Womack, Nick, I don't know how to say his last. We'll call him Nick Z. Nope. Kalia Davis. Tariq Castro Fields. We all know him because he didn't make their roster. He ended up on their practice squad, and we snatched him off their practice squad. He's done nothing for us, clearly. And then there's Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant, 7th round. We know his story. We know what he's doing right now in San Francisco. He's in the mix for the NFL MVP. He won't win it because of the Baltimore Ravens game, but he's in the mix. The guy's a winner. End of the discussion. So another gem and dime at the end of the draft turned in by this 49ers team, Adam Peters and company. And then we get to the 2023 draft. Again, you're not going to really be able to glean much from this, but we will get to this. 12-5 record. That's what they've had. That's what they posted this year. 9 Pro Bowlers. So it went from 7 to 9 and 7 All-Pros. So they're at an all-time high right now. 9 Pro Bowlers, 7 All-Pros. When they got to San Francisco in 2017, the number was 2 Pro Bowlers, no All-Pros. 7 drafts later, 9 Pro Bowls, 7 All-Pros. Hell of a job. Hell of a job. So this draft right here, I want you to take a look at a couple of things. One, no first round pick, no second round pick. All right. So they didn't have those two at their disposal. Talked about why. This one is from not only the trade for Trey Lance, but it's also for Christian McCaffrey. Remember, they gave a bunch of 2s, a 4 and a 6, something like that. As you can see, no 4th round pick, no 2nd round pick. That's the McCaffrey trade. Jair Brown has been really good for them this year as safety out of Penn State. Jake Moody took over for Robbie Gould, who was their longtime place kicker. He's had his moments this year, but he had a big miss against the Browns that would have won them the game. He's been solid. I don't trust him yet, but I always tell you I have patience for young kickers. So my biggest issue with them is look where they took them. That's my biggest pet peeve. So it is what it is. Whatever happens, it happens. And all I can say is I told you so. Cameron Latu was a guy that I loved coming out of Alabama at the tight end position. I think he's going to ultimately be really good for them when it's all said and done. Darrell Luter is a cornerback out of South Alabama, an undersized guy that can run that I liked in that draft. So we'll see what he turns out to be for them. Robert Beal is a linebacker out of Georgia. We'll see, down the road. What ultimately happened is 2-3 years from now, Robert Beal will end up being a new Dre Greenlaw for them in the 5th round, and we're going to go, damn, they did it again. D. Winters, linebacker out of TCU. Braden Willis, tight end out of Oklahoma. Ronnie Bell starting to get a little bit of work with the injury to Juwan Jennings. Ronnie Bell was getting work at the end of the season and ended up starting to play well. And then Jalen Graham, safety out of Purdue. So those are the 7 drafts. I just want you to keep in mind, because I had somebody hit me up today and say, hey, this is why we're not going to draft a quarterback. You see that they didn't draft a quarterback in the first, 3 or 4 drafts with him in San Francisco. Well, you know why? Because they wanted Kirk Cousins, and then they ultimately traded for Jimmy Garoppolo. They didn't want a rookie quarterback. They wanted a veteran because they wanted to try to turn things around. Quick, faster than slow, right? So they went the veteran route. They wanted to go the veteran route. That's why they didn't draft a quarterback. What I also want you to take into consideration is he came from somewhere where they're not afraid to deal. They're not afraid to trade. They're not afraid to go get a commodity that they feel like can help them win, and they're not afraid to give up draft picks to do so. How many drafts do you see where they are missing picks in the middle rounds, or they're missing their 1st or their 2nd round pick? They're not afraid. Early in the process, sure, they weren't really giving up a lot of stuff. They were making their selections. But as they got closer, and this is what happens, as you get closer and closer to winning, when you feel like you've got the roster that you need to win, now you start taking chances. That started around 2019, and you can see what happened in the 2020 draft. You can see what happened in the 2022 draft. You can see the impact as they started going after players, after they started going after guys like Trent Williams, going after guys like Emmanuel Sanders, going after guys like Dee Ford, going after guys like Christian McCaffrey. You could see Jimmy Garoppolo. When they got close, and they felt like they were ready, you could see what they started to do, right? So understand that he's not afraid to trade. He's not going to be. If they like Caleb Williams and the Bears are willing to deal, if they feel like Caleb Williams is the difference maker, he'll go get him. He's not afraid. This is what this tells you. He's not afraid. They went up and got Trey Lance. He won't be afraid if that's the guy that he pegs as the future of this franchise. and he's available. Otherwise, he'll just sit and stand pat. And if he doesn't love any of the other quarterbacks, highly unlikely that he's not going to take one of them, right? Highly unlikely. But if he doesn't love one of the other quarterbacks, he won't take one of them. That's proven too. They didn't take a quarterback that first draft. They didn't have a quarterback at that time, and they were sitting right there at number 2 with Mahomes, Watson, and Mitchell Trubisky all available to them, and they passed on all 3 of them. But that's because Kyle really wanted Kirk Cousins, and if he couldn't get Cousins, he had his eye on Jimmy Garoppolo, and he made the deal, right? But also, another thing that you should be able to take away from this is he believes in building up the trenches. Washington has gone, what, 9 or 8 drafts now? 9 drafts? We're going to the 2024 draft, right? Brandon Sheriff was the 2015 draft, if I'm not mistaken. First round 15 draft. Because 14 was Trent Murphy, and we didn't have a first round pick, and Trent Murphy was our first pick in 2014. So Brandon Sheriff was the first round pick in 2015. That was the last time we went offensive lineman in the first round. We didn't go offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds until we took Sam Cosmi, if I'm not mistaken. We took Morgan Moses in the 3rd round, and we took what was the tackle's name? That I just saw him with the Browns, coincidentally enough. What was the name of that the one that Trent Williams got pissed off that we took in the 3rd round? Oh man, I can see his damn face. Y'all know who I'm talking about. What was the name of that damn tackle we took in the 3rd round? And Trent got pissed off because he felt like we were drafting that dude to replace him. He plays for the Browns now. I didn't know that. Jerron Christian. Thank you, Maverick Walker, Dream Team Buddha. Yeah, Jerron Christian. That was a 3rd round pick. Or Jaron Christian, excuse me. Jaron Christian. Never ever trust a man with 2 first names. Y'all know that. And then we took Sadiq, 3rd round pick. Like, we were allergic to spending 1st or 2nd round draft capital on offensive linemen. And what you see here is they're going to spend, even if it means trading for a guy. Like they traded for Laken Tomlinson as soon as they got there. Guy that ended up being one of the linchpins on the interior of their offensive line. They went out and traded for Sean Coleman. It didn't work, but that didn't stop them from trying. They drafted Mike McGlinchey in the 1st round, right? So Aaron Banks in the 2nd round. So you see they're not afraid to build up that offensive line. They got, and then you got to find some gems. Colton McKivitz in the 5th round. He ain't the best right tackle in the world, but you can do a hell of a lot worse than Colton McKivitz, and he can play both left and right. Left in a pinch. He's more of a right tackle. But when they had injuries against the Ravens, he kicked over to the left side. So, and also what is abundantly clear is they're not going to ignore the linebacker position. They spent the 1st round pick on Reuben Foster. They then went and got Fred Warner in the 3rd round. They drafted Dre Greenlaw in the 5th round. They went and got in that same draft with Dre Greenlaw as a 5th round pick. They went in the undrafted pool and got 2 more linebackers that ended up being key contributors in Azeez Al-Shire and Flanagan Fowles. So again, they're not going to ignore the linebacker position. That's another thing you don't have to worry about moving forward. Is they're going to attack all of the positions that we need, and you got to feel good about the hit rate in these later rounds, and the kind of roster you can build when you're hitting in the 4th, the 5th. The 3rd, really, it starts with them in the 3rd in particular. But when you're hitting in the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th and the 6th and even in the 7th, and then some undrafted guys, it really strengthens your roster. It really gives you an opportunity. One of the biggest issues we've had in Washington is the lack of depth. key guys go down and we're screwed because we just don't have any depth behind the guys that are our frontline starters. When you draft well, you eliminate that. The drop-off isn't as great. You can't pay everybody, but if you draft well, you want to pay a lot of guys. Hopefully, we start accumulating some all-pro players, some Pro Bowl players, guys that we can say, hey, he's among the best at his position. That's been one of the biggest reasons why we can't be a consistent winner here in Washington. We don't have blue chip players. Hopefully, with Adam Peters and his evaluating eye, we're about to embark upon a different day and age in Washington where the blue chip players are coming one after another. The Pro Bowls are coming one after another. The All Pros are coming one after another. And when's the last time that we said, hey, that dude right there is a Hall of Fame player, and he's going to go in as a Redskin, as a Commander? When's the last time we had that conversation? We know who it is. He ain't going in as a Redskin or a Commander. It's Trent Williams. And before that, you got to go all the way back to Sean Taylor. We don't draft those dudes around here. Hopefully that's about to change. So anyway, hope that helped. Shout out to my guy, Video Channel, for the suggestion. Let's get to the comment section and see what you guys have to say. Keno, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Keno writes, Adam Peters has watched a guy they took with the last pick be in the conversation for league MVP and lead them to the playoffs. Rare. Yes, but how much would that boost your confidence to find talent? Again, you don't want to hedge. You don't want to hitch yourself, your wagon, essentially, to the 7th round Mr. Irrelevant pick of the draft at the quarterback position. First of all, they didn't draft Brock Purdy to be the starter of the future. They drafted similar to what they did with when they got Nick Mullins, who wasn't drafted, he was undrafted. Similar to what they did when they did draft in the 3rd round CJ Beathard, right? Similar to what they've done over the life of how long they've been in San Francisco. They've always drafted a guy that's played a ton of college football to be the backup quarterback in San Francisco because they knew they weren't going to keep Nick Mullins. He was going to get paid by somebody else to be a backup. Okay, we found another one. Okay, CJ Beathard's our new backup. All right, at some point, CJ Beathard's going to age out of the process and somebody's going to give him some good money to be a backup. We'll go get another one. That's what Brock Purdy was supposed to be behind Trey Lance. And then Lance didn't work out. And remember, they wanted to trade Jimmy Garoppolo that offseason, but he had to have shoulder surgery and nobody wanted to give them anything. So they held on to him. And good thing that he did because Trey Lance broke his ankle in the 2nd week of the season and they had to go to Jimmy Garoppolo and he kept them afloat. Then he got injured and then they had no choice but to go to Brock Purdy and they kind of fell into that. Again, that's not what you're aiming to do. 7th round quarterbacks are 7th round quarterbacks, usually for a reason. But they ran into a guy that fit their system perfectly, and he's played so well for them. But yes, it is an indication of, having the ability to find guys that fit your scheme and your system. But that's not something that you want to try to replicate. You rather, again, when you look at the NFL, you look at the starting quarterbacks in this league at the quarterback position, we've gone through this exercise before. Most of them are 1st round picks. Most of them are 1st round picks. The ones that aren't 1st round picks, how many times have they advanced in the playoffs? How many playoff games have they won? We can do this exercise. because it ain't too many dudes that weren't drafted in the first round. Look at the playoffs right now. 8 quarterbacks left. 7 of them drafted in the first round. The one not drafted in the first round is Brock Purdy. He was the last pick in the draft. And we went through that exercise. Of the 7, 5 of them were drafted in the top 10. Of the 5 that were drafted in the top 10, like 3 of them were drafted in the top 5. So again, drafting guys at the top of the draft, number 1 overall, gives you the best chance to hit. Number 1 overall. It's rare in this, I won't say rare. It's unlikely in this league when you draft a guy number 1 overall that you miss at the quarterback position. Just think about all of the number 1 overall picks at the quarterback position over the last 20 years. I mean, that's pretty hard to do. That's a lot of guys you got to try to roll through the Rolodex to remember. But I mean, hell, let's give it a shot, right? 2000 and we'll start with the 04 draft since we're going into the 24 draft. 04 was a very good draft in the NFL. That was the Roethlisberger, Manning, Breeze draft, right? So, or Rivers, excuse me. Roethlisberger, Rivers, Manning draft. Manning went 1 overall. They had to trade him to New York for Phillip Rivers. So look how that turned out. I mean, that's 3 Hall of Famers right there, including the number 1 overall pick. 2005 was Alex Smith. He's not going in the Hall of Fame. The guy that should have went number 1 was Aaron Rodgers, but that's no here nor there. 2006. Who was the? I don't think there was a quarterback that went number 1 overall that year. Would be my guess. That feels like an edge rusher or a tackle or something. I don't remember anybody being prominent in the 06. I could be wrong. Could be a quarterback. I just don't think so. 07 draft was who? I don't think it was I don't know if it was a quarterback again. Could have been a quarterback. Could have been. I'm trying to think. 6. I want to say, was that Reginald Bush and all of those dudes? And I think that was because if that's the Reginald Bush, that's the Mario Williams draft. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure that's what that Vince Young, Mario Williams, and Reginald Bush is 6. So no quarterback that year. 7. You might have got a USC quarterback. I'm thinking about Carson Palmer. That was 03. He was number 1 overall in 03. None of those other USC boys went number 1 overall. Not Leinart, Barkley, Dirty Ches, none of them. So I don't think you got a quarterback in 07. Was 07? Was 07 Jamarcus? Or was 08 Jamarcus Russell? You getting in that Jamarcus Russell territory. 7 feels right for him. I think 7 was Jamarcus Russell. I want to look it up, but I don't want to cheat yet. I want to see how many of these I can get before I look it up. I'm going to put Jamarcus Russell with 07. That was a disaster, obviously. 08. 08. I'm drawing a blank in 08. 09. Oh, 09. I don't think a quarterback was taken in 09. Maybe that's why I'm drawing a blank, because it's not a quarterback in 8 or 9. If not a quarterback, then who? That's what you got to ask yourself. That's probably what I should be doing. That'll help me think. Who was the? I was about to put Eric Fisher, but that's not till like 13. I think Eric Fisher went 1 in 2013's draft. So we'll go to 2010. I can't think of 09. 2010. Who was popping then? I can't think of no quarterbacks in 2010. All these drafts can't be without a quarterback at the top, though. So I got to be missing out on somebody. But there were a lot of stinking ass years where were no quarterbacks that were even thought to be guys. I mean, one of these drafts is E.J. Manuel going at 16, and he was the only quarterback that went in the first round that year. I don't think I've gotten to that point yet. I'm getting close if I haven't hit it already. 11 was Cam Newton at 1. Wait. Stafford. Stafford's got to be in here somewhere. 9 or 10. Stafford to the Lions. When did they go 0-16? Was that 08? Yes, it was. Stafford's 09. I don't think there was a quarterback in 08. Stafford is 09. I don't think there was a quarterback in 10, unless Stafford is 10. I'm going to put Stafford at 9. How long has he been in the league? I'm putting 09 on Stafford. I don't have a quarterback for 10. Cam is 11. 12 is Andrew Luck. No quarterback. I think Fisher went 1 in 13. 14 was 14 was the Khalil Mack, Jadeveon Clowney draft, because that was the draft with Johnny Manziel in 14. It was a funkster at the quarterback position. 15 was Jameis Winston. 16 was Carson Wentz. Or excuse me, Jared Goff. 17 was, who went first in 17? Was it Myles Garrett that went number 1 overall? I think so. I think Myles Garrett went 1, and then Mitchell Trubisky went 2 to the Bears. No, it wasn't a quarterback. That's all I know. 18 was Baker Mayfield. 19 was Kyler Murray. 20 was Joe Burrow. 21 was Trevor Lawrence. 22 wasn't a quarterback. It was the edge rusher for Jacksonville from Georgia, Trayvon Walker. In 23, it was Bryce Young. So, just going off of what we just did, you can still miss at 1, clearly, right? But golf has been, all right, so let's go through the list of guys that we just came up with. Hall of Famers all throughout the 14 draft, but the one at the top, Eli Manning, he's going to end up. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. I said what I said. But he won 2 Super Bowls, and he was Super Bowl MVP in both of those Super Bowls. He's going to the Hall of Fame. And his last name is Manning. But you look at his regular season statistics and all the shit, he ain't no damn Hall of Famer. But that's another argument and debate for another day. 2005, no on Alex Smith. 2006, not a quarterback. 2007 is Jamarcus Russell. 2008, we never figured out what happened in 08. I'd have to look that up. I don't think it was a quarterback. personally. 09, I put Stafford there, going to the Hall of Fame. 2010, I couldn't think of what happened there. I don't think it was a quarterback, though. Anyway, 11, Cam, probably not going to the Hall of Fame, but went to a Super Bowl and was one of the best players in the league during his playing career. 12, Andrew Luck. We all know what happened to his career, but before he retired, one of the best in the league when he was playing. All right. 13, no quarterback. 14, no quarterback. 15, Jameis Winston. Didn't go the way that they hoped. Started out well, didn't go the way they hoped. 16, Jared Goff, been to a Super Bowl, could be going to another one this year. And I don't know how many quarterbacks have done this. It's a very short list. I would imagine that have taken two different franchises to the Super Bowl. I know Peyton Manning's done it. I know Peyton Manning's done it. Tom Brady's done it. That's probably about it. I can't think of too many other quarterbacks that have taken multiple franchises to the Super Bowl. That shit is rare. If Goff does that, look out. 17, no quarterback. But that had Mahomes and Watson in it, but no quarterback at 1. But again, these are first-round quarterbacks we're talking about. And that's the key, is get you a first-round quarterback, essentially. But 18 had 5 quarterbacks go in the first round, including Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. But Baker Mayfield went number 1 overall. He's still in the playoffs right now. Okay? Say what you want about Bake. I actually like Bake. Played well for Tampa Bay. He's won playoff game again. Has the same amount of playoff victories as Dak Prescott. '19, Kyler Murray, really good quarterback. I don't think he's ever going to win anything of note, but he's showing a little bit more leadership. I saw him tweet out that he told his teammates, this is the last time we sit in the playoffs out. As long as I'm healthy, this shit is over with. We're not doing this shit no more. I like to hear that. We'll see what happens. 2020, Joe Burrow, already been to the Super Bowl and has played in 2 AFC championships. When he's healthy, they go to the AFC championship game. That's what he's proven to us in his young career. 21, Trevor Lawrence, been to the divisional round in his career so far. 2022, no quarterback. 2023, Bryce Young, gotten off to a pretty poor start, but we'll see what happens. Anyway, I digress. That was a fun exercise. Always like to challenge the brain. I got to check 2010's draft real quick. That was the only one that I didn't feel like I had an answer for. And I got to check Stafford to see when he came out. He might be 2010 draft. I might have got it wrong. We'll see. 2010, Sam Bradford. Wow. So it was a quarterback in 2010. So Stafford has to be 9 then. I must have gotten him correct. Stafford has to be 9. Yep. Proud of myself. What about 08? I couldn't think of anybody for 08 because I don't think that it was I don't think it was a quarterback. I really don't. But I didn't think 10 had a quarterback either. So let's see. Jake Long. Matt Ryan was the highest selected quarterback that year at number 3. So, damn, my memory is good. I thought I could do better than I did, though. But I missed on Sam Bradford. I forgot about his stinking ass. But that about it. So, Oh, Jamarcus, let me check and see if that was 07. That could have been 06. Let me check on him real quick. 2000, I put him in 7. 2007 NFL draft is where I put him. Let's see. Got him. Got his ass. So, and I'm pretty sure if I got that, then I know the Reginald Bush draft was 06 with Mario Williams and Vince Young and all of those boys. If I got 07 right, then I know I got 06 right. Sweet action. Vince Young was the highest quarterback taken at number 3. So I said all of that to say this. If you want a quarterback, the best route to take is to get one in the first round. If you look around the league, first round quarterbacks are everywhere. Not all of them are good. Not all first round quarterbacks pan out. You're not guaranteed anything. Top 5, top 10, doesn't matter. Top number 1 overall, as we just went through that exercise. You're not guaranteed to hit. It just gives you a better chance to hit when you draft a guy in the first round. They're going to draft a quarterback. Whether it's at 1 or 2, they're taking a quarterback. So I don't think them finding Brock Purdy is going to, it may lead them to draft a quarterback. It may lead them to potentially double dip in this draft and draft another young quarterback, or next year draft a 5th or a 6th round quarterback, or a 4th or 3rd round quarterback, because they may not bring Sam Howell back. Because remember, everybody kept talking about, oh, we got Sam on his rookie deal. Sam is not a first round pick, so you don't have that extra year. This is year 3 of Sam Howell. So there's 2 more years left on that rookie deal. You'll need a backup quarterback at some point. Whether you draft one this year or you draft one next year, you're going to need one if you're not going to re-sign him. So I assume he's going to be back. I think he's more than capable of being a damn good backup quarterback for the time being. I think he's a starter in this league, personally. You know how I feel about him. And I think he could easily have a Kirk Cousins-like trajectory to his career. Be a backup until finally you realize he should be playing. He ends up going somewhere else and he starts playing his best football. We'll see. Jason Fios, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, what up, Lou? What's up, Jason? One concern if we hire Ben Johnson isn't his offense under center. Play action fake may be a better fit, or how would Caleb fit be shorter? I don't concern myself with the matters of his offense fitting anything that we have here. The reason why I'm so confident in Ben Johnson is because literally I've looked at what they do in Detroit and I said, we could do that here. Now, obviously, we have to upgrade the offensive line. That's the first thing that has to be done. If you want his offense to work, you gotta upgrade the offensive line. But even saying that, we ran the football well last season. We had a good run blocking offensive line. If you can run the football, you take pressure off your pass protection, because if you're leaning on them and you're running the football, you force them to play run first. Now they don't have to pass block as well. That gives you the opportunity to get rid of the football and play action fake. But again, I still think upgrades need to happen on the offensive line. We all know that this needs to take place. And we need a tight end. Other than that, and we don't have a speed back right now, you can draft one of those. But outside of a speed back, a tight end, an athletically gifted tight end, and technically, if Amani Rodgers comes back healthy, you could have one of those, but I'd still want to draft a guy. And you need, 1 or 2 offensive linemen, bare minimum. You could do what they do on offense. We have an Amon-Ra St. Brown. They don't even have a Jahan Dotson. We do. We got a David Montgomery. We got the pieces here. We can do what they've done. Now, who fits it better? Would it be May or would it be Caleb? I don't know. I told you I got to watch these dudes to be more comfortable with who is what and what is who. We're going to get to that. And I'm going to check out the site that my guy sent me. He sent me a Patreon that might have the all 22s. And if that's the case, Mob, you know what we going to do. We diving into the film. You already know what it is, Mob. If this is legit, we watching film together. And we're going to break some of these prospects down. So y'all know what it is, Mob. And then you're going to know exactly why I feel the way I feel. Because you're going to watch me. We're going to watch it together. I'll say this. If you're going to draft Caleb Williams, you better have the interior of your offensive line be as stout as it can possibly be. It's the same issue we ran into with Sam. It's the same issues that they ran into with Drew Brees, which is why the Saints always had guard to guard locked down. Period. King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, I know this is a hot take, Lou, but I think if Washington takes a quarterback at 2, would it be a huge mistake, other than Caleb, of course? When you scout these top 3 quarterbacks, you will understand where I'm coming from. And look, sometimes what you see in college isn't always the best representation of what a guy is capable of at the next level. And I've learned that over the years. This is not an exact science. It's not apples to apples. You watch a guy, and what you look for are all of the intangibles, all of the measurables, all of the things that you see, what you value in a quarterback, what I value in a quarterback, what Adam Peters values in a quarterback, what Ben Johnson values in a quarterback, what Miss Perry values in a quarterback. It's totally different for all of us. You might be looking at this one thing. I might be looking at these 2 things. You know, Miss Perry might be looking at that thing or those 2 things over there. Adam Peters is looking at 3 things totally different from anything we're talking about. Ben Johnson is like, I don't care about none of this shit any of y'all talking about. This is what I'm looking for. He's played the position, right? So he's looking for specific things. Is Ben Johnson. I always feel like former quarterbacks make the best play callers. I always feel that way. And there's no empirical proof that that's correct. I just always feel like the guys who have played the position, no matter at what level, how good they were, that's irrelevant. If you played the position, you know it front and back. You know what you're looking for. You know how it's supposed to be played. I always think about Jay Gruden. Really good offensive mind, can scheme it up and get guys open. Had a piece of shit run game, but passing the football, Jay could get them open, man. Jay could scheme them open like nobody's business, which is why Kirk Cousins put up the numbers he put up here in Washington. Jay can get them open. You know, Sean Payton can get them open. When you get a former quarterback, don't matter what level they play at, Doug Peterson can get them open. He can get them open. I've always felt like former quarterbacks make the best offensive coordinators. But again, that's no here nor there. Ben Johnson's a former quarterback, and I think he would make a fantastic offensive coordinator. And I know your question was, is this going to be a mistake if we take one of these quarterbacks? If it's a mistake that you got to be willing to make. When you're drafting this high and the talent is there, I can just tell you this. A lot of us didn't see Justin Herbert turn into what he turned into. But he had the talent, and I remember saying this. I remember this was my quote for him in that draft. I did not like Justin Herbert. I likened him to Marcus Mariota in terms of he played at Oregon, in a wide open offense with wide open receivers, and he's very meek. He's not a leader. I don't see him translating well, but I said he's toolsy. That was always my line with Justin. He's toolsy. And if somebody can take those tools and mold them into what he could potentially be, you got yourself something. Because you can't teach 6'6". You can't teach a hose for a right arm. And you can't teach his athleticism. Either you have those things or you don't. He does. So, and he turned out to be a stud. So you never know, right? You can't be people watching Jordan Love's final season, people watching Josh Allen's last year at Wyoming. You wouldn't have drafted him in the first round, or in the case of Josh Allen, a top 10 pick. You wouldn't have done it. Bet you if you went back and watched his Nevada tape, you wouldn't have spent the first round pick on him. Definitely not 7th overall. But it's not about, it's not always about what the tape says. Sometimes there's excuses, there's reasons as to why you're watching what you're watching. The key is, does he have all of the traits? Is he a guy that is a quick study? Does he put in the work? Like, there's certain things that you're not taking into consideration about Jaden Daniels or Drake May that may make him the right option for this team. I've heard nothing but good things about Jaden Daniels in terms of his work ethic and the type of person that he is. Like, that shit matters. Because if you're that kind of guy, if you're willing to put in the work, we can clean up some of the flaws that you may have and some of the issues that you may have right now as a player. We might be able to clean that shit up. Turn you into the type of player that you can be at your best. So you can't always go off of, well, this is what I see on tape. Is it correctable? Like with basketball players, if a guy has a very low shooting percentage from the field and he can't shoot, the first thing you go to is the jumper broke? Is it broken? Like you look at a guy like Tony Allen, I can't fix that. That shit is broke. That form, all of that shit is, I can't, he's going to have to figure out how to be the best shooter he can with the shit that he's got, because that's not fixable. Then there are other guys that you might be able to break them down and rebuild them. Like the Magic had to do with the former number 1 overall pick from the 76ers. They had to break his shit down and remake him. He couldn't even shoot free throws. But you could fix that jumper. Some dudes, like Sean Marion, it won't no fixing that shit. He was going to have to be the best Sean Marion he could with that little flick shit from like chest level. Never teach your kids to shoot like that. It worked for him. One of them, a player on my team, Jaren Jackson Jr., Trip, never teach your kids to shoot like a 16-year-old girl. He's literally leaning towards the basket and pushing the ball. It's not how you shoot a basketball. It works for him, right? But a lot of times when guys, and if they're shooting well, you don't tinker with it. You leave it alone. And Jaren Jackson Jr. was shooting 40% at Michigan State from 3. You're not touching that. Leave that shit alone. It's when it's broke, when he's shooting 31%. Hey, that's a good stroke. One of the two things we might tinker with, but we can fit. That's a fixable stroke. Same thing in the NFL. You were talking about Drake May's footwork. He got happy feet, this, that, and the third. We can fix that. That can be corrected. Sam Howell's footwork was pretty bad when he got to the NFL. His footwork was pretty good this year. That wasn't the issue. That wasn't the issue. As long as you got the things that we need, we can work on all the other stuff. You got to have it up here. You got to have the work ethic, and then you got to have the talent. And what order you looking for those things to be, I can't say. But you got to have it up here. You got to have the work ethic, and you got to have the talent. You got those 3 things, and we can do something with that. So we'll see. LouieMan67. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, I've heard you say before that Ben Johnson is a Skins fan. How do you know this? And is there a video somewhere where I can see him talking about it? No, I've heard this from someone else who's talked to him. Someone else said this. So this is third-hand information. So I can't verify this. I can't confirm nor deny this. But he grew up in Carolina at a time when the Panthers did not exist. So it made a lot of sense when someone said it to me. Okay. But again, I've never seen him say it. I've never seen it in print. So he could not be a Redskins fan. But it was told to me that he is a Redskins fan. I saw where he grew up, and I put 2 and 2 together, and I said, that's probably accurate. Now, again, I assumed, I drew an inference. I could be wrong. But that's how it was told to me. He's a Redskins fan, or grew up a Redskins fan. And again, he's the exact same age as I am. And when he was growing up, there was no Carolina Panthers. So, again, I'm assuming, and I don't know who raised him, but I'm assuming, because we know there are a lot of Redskins fans in Carolina because that was the closest team to them for a very long time. If he was raised by parents that were Redskins fans or his dad was a Redskins fan, he's probably a Redskins fan more likely than not. And that's the inference I drew. But no, I don't actually have proof of that. So I could be wrong. Somebody could have fed me false information and I ran with it. But I'm willing to take that risk. D for the win. Thank you for becoming a member, the newest member of the MOBB. Stand up. You're in the building. You know what it is. Mob, y'all know what to do. Welcome D for the win with open arms. Welcome D to the squad. Glad to have you. Looking forward to chopping up with you in the future. King of the Bluegrass. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes? Expectations for quarterback picked at number 2. Consistent winning and at least one Super Bowl, generally after 3 years starting experience, right? I can't see those expectations met with these QBs minus Caleb. Still not 100% sold on him. I don't ever like to put a cap on what you're supposed to get out of a specific player that was drafted at a specific. This is what I will say. When you draft there's certain positions where you can say that at. To me, quarterback isn't one of them. What I can say is when you draft a quarterback very high, you need to know that he's the guy by year 2. Like after his second season in the league, you should be able to say, we got our quarterback. You should be able to tell. Probably should be able to tell after year 1, but I'm a big do it again type of guy. Because I've seen Robert Griffin III have the rookie season he had and never be able to replicate that again in his career. So I'm a big, hey, do it again. And if you can do it again, if it even looks remotely close to what you did the year prior, all right, we got ourselves a winner. Let's roll, right? But how many quarterbacks get taken early in the draft and don't win a Super Bowl in their first 3 years? And I don't know if that's what you were saying, that they should win one in their first 3 years, but you should win one at some point in your career if you're, the second overall pick. Really, if you're a first-round pick, to validate being a first-round pick, you should win a Super Bowl or at least get to one at some point in your career. But you would like to see some success pretty early on. Like Joe Burrow, that's ideal, but that's not what happens in this league very often. Joe Burrow has finished 2 whole seasons in his career. He went to the AFC Championship game in both of those seasons, and he went to the Super Bowl in one of those 2 seasons, right? Didn't finish his first season, didn't finish his last season thus far. But the 2 in between, Super Bowl appearance, AFC Championship game. So he's got a high hit rate when he finishes the season. But he's a different breed. I told you, of the quarterbacks I've scouted, and I started doing it in 2012, he, to me, was the highest rated quarterback that I've ever scouted. And Andrew Luck was a close second. And then there's a sizable gap after those 2. And then you get to number 3 for me, which was Trevor Lawrence. So, I don't know. I just feel like the biggest thing that you get out of the number 2 pick first contract is you should have, and I think it kind of marries with what I said about Adam Peters. Somebody asked me, what's a successful, 5 years for him, first contract? And that's kind of how I feel about a rookie quarterback that you drafted very high. By year 2, I need to know you're the guy. By year 3, we need to be in the playoffs. By year 4, you needed to have won a playoff game or 2. And by year 5, we need to be threatening to do some damage. Like seriously talking about winning the Super Bowl, championship game, et cetera, et cetera. That's what it should be. I mean, when you think about some of the best quarterbacks in the league over the last 6 years or so, 7 years, give or take, Mahomes has done that. Lamar has done that. Joe Burrow has done that. Josh Allen has done that. That's what, if you're putting yourself in that conversation, that's what you should be. Jalen Hurts has done that. Whether you believe he belongs in that conversation or not, he did that. So that's what it should look like. But we'll see. CR7's the GOAT. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, if Ben Johnson is such a great coach, how come the Lions scored 6 against the Ravens while Mike McDonald ran circles around Ben Johnson? Look, you ain't going to score 100 points every week. You're not going to score 30 or 40 points every week. I've seen the tweets about Mike McDonald and what he's done against all of these top-notch offenses and offensive play callers and et cetera, et cetera. I can tell you that the Ravens jumped a lot of these teams early and then made them one-dimensional. Like if you want to talk about the Lions game, it couldn't have started any worse. And part of that was the defense didn't show up. I think the Ravens got the ball first, drove it down the field, scored a touchdown. The Lions went 3 and out. Ravens scored another touchdown. Then the Lions turned it over. They scored another touchdown. And that, you look up, literally that score was like 28-0 in the first quarter. Lions and Ravens. You can't run the ball anymore. Now you asking Jared Goff to throw it 50 some odd times and win you a game. That is not a place that I want to live. I am not safe there. No one's safe there. That's not a world I want to live in. So, hey, sometimes you just get your ass kicked. And it's not on the offensive coordinator by himself, because they could have answered the Ravens' opening drive score with a score of their own. But they didn't. And Goff looked visibly shaken in that game. He looked rattled. They got to him early. He was not himself. So, again, what I've realized over the years is that when great offense meets great defense wins 90% of the time, 9 times out of 10. It's rare that a great offense trumps a great defense. I said that about the national championship game. I'm like, Washington's had one of the best offenses in football. Michigan has been the best defense in football, in college football this season. Rubber meets the road. What usually happens in these situations? Michigan wins. Why? Because defense usually beats good offense. Great defense beats great offense, usually. That's what happened. Doesn't mean Mike McDonald is a better coach. Just means he out-schemed him that day. Doesn't mean he's a better coach. Right? I just leave it at that. Is Tom Coughlin a better coach than Bill Belichick? He beat him twice in the Super Bowl. That means he's a better coach? I don't think that's what that means. He just got him in that. He got him that day, right? Shit happens. Christopher McLaughlin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy Chris writes, hey, Lou. Hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise, as always. Really appreciate you, Chris. Who writes, 2 questions. Who do you think the team will place the franchise tag on? Curl, if no deal is done, and why? And 2, do you think B-Rod can be a consistent 20 rush a game running back, and why? So I can answer your second question very quickly. Yes. And it's because, 1, he's got a lot of tread on the tires. He was not the guy at Alabama until his final year at Bama. He literally waited as Derrick Henry and Bo Scarborough and Josh Jacobs and Damian Harris and all of these backs paraded in front of him. He waited and waited and waited and waited and waited and waited until his turn came. He could have transferred like everybody else does, but he didn't. He stayed. And when his opportunity came, he made the most of it. But that means he's got a lot of tread left on the tires. And 2, we've seen him be a physical bruising back that runs through arm tackles and can be a hammer that you can hand it to. Has he had 20, carry games? No, but that's not because he wasn't capable of it. They didn't give it to him. I think he can be that guy for sure. For sure. Will they put the franchise tag on? No, I don't think they will put a franchise tag. Cam Curl is a guy you want back. I think they will allow him to test free agency. If they really want him back, then they'll slap the franchise tag on him. I don't think Adam Peters is married to anybody that's here on this roster right now, as it currently stands, including Cam Curl. I think Peters will look at the film and see that he's a smart football player, and you can win a lot of games with a guy like Cam Curl on your defense. But I think he's also going to put a price on him, what he's worth. I don't know what the franchise tag for the safety position is. I would imagine that it's gone up over the last 3 or 4 years significantly. And I don't know what it is, but I don't know if they'll be willing to pay Cam Curl that. I've already said Cam Curl isn't worth what a lot of the top safeties in the league get because he's not a playmaker. He doesn't turn the football over. He doesn't do the things that guys like Justin Simmons and Kevin Byard, who got a nice deal, 4 or 5 years ago, but more recently, Jesse Bates III, Justin Simmons, and Minka Fitzpatrick and Marcus Williams that went to the Ravens. Those are the 4 guys that I think have been paid at the safety position of late. All of those guys are playmakers. All of those guys take the football away. Cam Curl doesn't do that. So I think there's a cap on how much you're willing to spend on him, and he's got to see it that same way. And if he does, I think there's a number that could make sense, but I don't think they're slapping a franchise tag on him. If this were the last group, I think they would have done it because that's their guy. New group coming in. I'm not tied to anybody, not slapping a franchise tag on anybody. I'm not tying up X amount of millions of dollars to one player. Either you're going to sign here for this amount of money that we've allotted for you, or you can see if you can get that same deal or more somewhere else out on the free agent market. 16 Devil Doc, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. 16 Devil Doc, thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Writes, Lou, it's going to get real interesting if Houston's offense is able to move up and down the field and score 4 or more touchdowns. We may have to take a serious look at Bobby Slowick, even if Houston loses. They're going to take a long, hard look at Houston, whether they lose, win, whether Bobby Slowick has that Texans offense humming and they score 31 points, or they score 3 points. They're going to take a hard, long look at Bobby Slowick regardless. Okay? Nothing that they do at this point is going to hurt them, right? Nothing. You have a 7 turnover game, you get shut out. That's not going to change the way they feel about Ben Johnson. Same thing for Bobby Slowick. The body of work is already there. You already know it. Now, what they do could help, clearly, but it's only going to help so much. You know who they are. You're either confident in them. And again, the key is you got to get to know these guys. That's what the interview is for. Adam Peters knows Bobby Slowick. There's an overlap there. We've talked about it already. So he knows his demeanor. He knows his work ethic. He knows what he's about. So I think he knows more about him. I don't think Adam Peters and Ben Johnson know each other. They may have met each other before in passing. I don't think they actually know each other. He doesn't know what type of a leader he can be. He doesn't know what type of a coach he is. These are the things you want to find out. But as far as the numbers and the production, that speaks for itself. And a playoff run, a bad showing in the postseason to exit isn't going to change that to me. It can only enhance your stock. It can't hurt it at this point. Like, whether the Eagles went on that run to the Super Bowl or not, Jonathan Gannon's defense was awful in the Super Bowl. It was awful. Didn't stop the Cardinals from hiring and did it? No, because the body of work was already there. They had already made up their minds on what Jonathan Gannon was. It's not going to change what you are or who I feel like you are. If you come in here and you ace this interview, which is the test, it's already spoken for. So they're already going to give Bobby Slowick a real shot at this thing. And if he goes in and he kills the interview and Ben Johnson doesn't, then he may be their guy. Christopher McLaughlin, my guy Chris, double up, thank you for doubling up, who writes, hey Lou, what do you consider the 3 biggest issues in order of position that need to be addressed on the defensive side of the team and why? So without question, we need a defensive end. That's non-negotiable. We need about 3 of them things. But I'll take 2 for the time being. But if you're not going to get anything in free agency, and I already told you, I would try to go get Jonathan Grenard. If he's available, the Texans would be stupid to let him walk. I don't think they're going to let him walk. But if he's available, that's the guy I'm going after. Okay? You're going to have to spend, but you're not going to have to spend like Josh Allen in Jacksonville or Brian Burns in Carolina money, right? He's the next tier down after those 2. And there's a significant drop-off after Burns to Allen, and then there's another drop-off from Allen to Grenard. That's where I'm going. Give me Grenard. But if you can't get him, you have to go in the draft for 2 dudes, so be it. But we need 2 of them things. That's top of the list. You can't get to the quarterback. Like, it was hard watching this defense after we traded Sweat and Young because I knew we couldn't get to the quarterback. If we didn't blitz, we were never getting to the quarterback. That's got to change. That's not allowed in this league. If you can't manufacture or muster some type of pressure with a 4-man rush, you're screwed. So that's 1. 2, we need a starting caliber corner. And I don't know if Emmanuel Forbes morphs into that or not, but Kendall Fuller is not going to be back probably. That's my guess, that he's not back. I'd love to have him back. But if he's not back, and you got to put Emmanuel Forbes and Benjamin St. Juste out there every week, you don't stand a chance. We got to go get us a corner. At least you got to have at least 1 guy you can trust. That's what Kendall Fuller was for us. At least 1 guy you can trust. We need a nickel too. We need that corner position really needs to be evaluated. And if Forbes can't play, and we won't know that for another year or 2, we'll probably have a really good idea after this year, though, if he stays healthy. We'll probably have a really good idea if he can play or not. But even if he can play, you still need somebody opposite of him, and you still need a nickel. So corner needs to be addressed. That's 2. And then 3rd on the list is linebacker for me. Because I think we got enough stuff at safety. We've been accumulating stuff over the years. Defoe will be back. I like what I saw to Quan Martin at the end of the season. You still got Percival Butler. It's enough stuff to play around at the safety position. Maybe you add another guy, but you don't have to do that early. For me, it's defensive end, then it's corner, then it's linebacker. Those are the 3 positions in that exact order. Video channel. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Lou, appreciate you running with my idea. I really appreciate you for giving me that idea, video channel. I really do appreciate you. That was a great idea, great exercise. As always, you went above and beyond with it. Also, expecting a tight end drafted in 24. Any names on the radar? I'm expecting a tight end to be drafted. I haven't dug into the position. I know of about 3 or 4 names. All of them I like. The Stover kid from Ohio State, he's really big. I don't think he's the type of athlete I'm looking for, but you could do some things with him. But that's not what I'm looking for. But I wouldn't turn him down in, say, the 3rd or 4th round, but that's not what I'm looking for. You know who I really want. I want Jatavian Sanders out of Texas. I think they're going to be – this is going to be another draft like last year where there's going to be a ton of tight ends, a lot of talent, and you can get to some good stuff. You know, I'm watching Green Bay, and the Kraft kid got him in like the 5th round. Yeah, they got Luke Musgrave in the 1st round. They got the Kraft kid in the 5th round, and he's been impactful for them. That's the Tucker Kraft. Like, that's the type of shit that I'm on. Like, yo, where's my Tucker Kraft? So there should be, a few names of guys. I've watched a bunch of dudes, and there's going to be some guys. There's going to be some guys available at the tight end. I'm not worried about tight end. We're going to find this one. I'm not worried. That's one position I'm not worried about. DC dude. May not be the one I want, but we're going to find a dude. DC dude, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, choose one if Caleb goes to Chicago. A, draft Drake May at 2. B, trade for Fields and draft MHJ at 2. I would probably draft Drake May at 2, assuming that I like what I see. I haven't watched him, so I can't say that I don't like the kid, but I know this much. Drake May is going to allow you to start your rookie clock over again. So you have 5 years. Drake May is going to allow you to hold on to whatever pick you were giving up for Justin Fields. A lot of you think you can do it with a 3. I doubt it. Somebody's going to be willing to give up a 2. Somebody might even be willing to give up a 1. Okay? So, I mean, teams like Atlanta and maybe the Steelers, maybe the Broncos, you don't know. I'm just looking at Atlanta and Pittsburgh in particular, just the Falcons alone, desperate. Don't know if you're going to be able to get him for anything less than a 2. Probably might even have to give up a 1. Are you willing to do that? You're definitely you're not giving up the number 2 overall pick for Justin Fields, clearly. So it'd have to be a future 1 because you're not giving up this year's 1. I think the highest Washington would be willing to give up is one of the 2s that they have, and it'd probably be the Chicago 2, not their 2. I don't even think I wouldn't even really want to give that up, to be honest with you, because I can't say that I know what Justin Fields is, but I think I know what Justin Fields is, and you're forcing me to make a decision on him pretty much right away, because this was year 3. If you trade for him immediately, you got to make a decision whether you're picking up the 5th-year option or not. Immediately, you have to make that decision. You have to, if you trade for him, to give him a chance to prove to you that he's the guy. It's a lot of money, and you're going to have to pretty much be on the hook for it. I would go the Drake May route, personally. But again, I could watch him and be like, nah, I'm good. Give me Justin Fields and Marvin Harrison Jr. instead. But the likelihood is I would just say, give me Drake May, and I'll roll with that. I don't really want anything to do with Justin Fields. Let somebody else deal with that. Zoe Life, No Life. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, impressive report, impressive resume for AP. He has youth, innovation, and vision. Now we just need good coaching staff to develop these gems. That's what it's all about. It's having him come in here, find these players that he found in San Francisco here, have the staff to develop them. That's important, just as you mentioned, because talent without development equals miss. So you got to have both. So the coaching staff and the coaches that they bring in here are going to be important too. But staff without talent, there's a cap on that. Great staff, they can get the most out of what they are given is cool, but there's only so much you can do if the talent isn't there, right? So now we don't have to worry about that part with Adam Peters. Now it's about, can we fill up the staff with guys that are high-level coaches and gals, right? Male and female. Can we fill up this staff with high-level coaches that are able to take the talent that they're given and maximize it? Red Wings 01. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you, Red Wings. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB, who writes, Jake Long was 08, Stafford was 10. Good memory. Nice. I broke down and looked it up before you gave it to me, but I should have just waited. I knew somebody was going to bless me. I forgot Bradford though. That one bothers me. That one bothers me that I forgot Bradford. I would have felt really good. Even though I couldn't remember Jake Long was the first round pick in 08, I felt like it wasn't a quarterback. I would have felt great because I would have gotten all of the quarterbacks had I gotten Bradford in 2010. Because it took me a while, but I was able to reach back, grab Stafford. I was able to grab Jamarcus Russell in 2007. The 06 came to me because I started thinking about USC and what was their last year of dominance. It was 05. That was Reginald Bush and Leinart and, Mike Williams, all those dudes. And I was like, that's 05 going into 06, Mario Williams, all that good stuff. I don't know why I couldn't think of Bradford stinking ass. Probably because he was very forgettable. Very forgettable. Appreciate you, Red Wings 01. Louie Man 67. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, I believe it. I'm from North Carolina. That's why I'm a fan for my late father. I prefer May over Caleb Williams because he slides in the pocket better and is 6'4", but I trust AP. Again, I don't know for sure if he's a fan of the team or not. That's just what I was told. Like I said, this is third-hand information. So it just made sense to me. I connected the dots. I looked at his age. I looked at the landscape of where he grew up, and I said, makes sense to me. There was no other team at the time. The Panthers didn't come along for another decade after he was born, so I would assume that he was probably a Redskins fan. That was my guess. I could be wrong. He could have got into football at a high level at the age of 12. And now the Panthers exist, and they made it to the NFC Championship game in '96 with Kerry Collins, and he's a Panthers fan. Who knows? He could be a Panthers fan for all I know. We'll see. But you're from Carolina, and that's why you're a Redskins fan, it sounds like, or a Commanders fan now. So I prefer taller quarterbacks. I've made that abundantly clear, but just because you're tall doesn't mean you're good, doesn't mean you're better than somebody else. That's a preference of mine. So I would like to see a taller quarterback here in Washington. I would like that a lot. But again, they went with, if Caleb Williams is who they want, and they ended up having an opportunity to go get him, do it. Like you said, I trust AP. That's what it's all about. That's how I feel too. King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, a Super Bowl at some point in the career of a franchise quarterback. Yeah, absolutely. That's mandatory. That's why Phillip Rivers feels empty, because he never made it to a Super Bowl. But that 1 year where he got them to the AFC Championship game on one ACL is like the things that folk tales are made of, right? Like that goes down in the folklore of NFL stories as pretty damn awesome, right? That you were able to drag your team to the AFC Championship on one ACL, essentially. But he never made it to a Super Bowl. But he's still gonna get in the Hall of Fame when it's all said and done. So yeah, that's usually the mark of a franchise quarterback. You got to take me to the Super Bowl at least one time. But doesn't always happen. We consider Kyler Murray a franchise quarterback. I don't see him going to a Super Bowl. I don't. Doesn't mean he won't end up being a really good quarterback in his career. He just might not never go to a Super Bowl. I don't think Carson Palmer ever went to a Super Bowl. He was a really good quarterback in his career. I think he made the furthest he ever made it was the NFC Championship game with the Arizona Cardinals back in 2015. But he was a good quarterback, but never made it to the Super Bowl. And there's a lot of those dudes that exist. Jado, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. Who writes, what up, Lou? What's up, Jay? It feels more like Ben is the guy. Ben is the guy until he's not the guy. That's how everyone should assume this process is going to work. Just like Adam Peters was the guy until he wasn't the guy, until he ultimately was the guy. Assume that Ben Johnson is the guy until he's not the guy. That's how I would play it. Junio Rudy, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Junio Rudy writes, someone to watch for the Commanders, Bryce Huff from the Jets. Love him. He's a situational pass rusher. This is the only thing that I would say is he doesn't play on every single snap. Is he the same guy that he is playing 42% of the snaps or 37% of the snaps versus playing 78% of the snaps? Is he the same guy? I highly doubt that. Part of what probably makes him as dynamic as he's been with the Jets is that he's essentially a specialized hitman. He's a specialized pass rusher. His job is to hunt the quarterback on 3rd and long. And he's done a hell of a job doing it. But what happens when you pay him all that money and you say, hey, I need you on all 3 downs, brother? Is he still going to hunt like that on 3rd down when he's been on the field for 1st and 2nd down? Because the Jets don't ask him to do that. They don't ask him to do that for the most part. But I have my eye on him too. King of the Bluegrass. Thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. King of the Bluegrass. Right. Mike Owinahu is a must in free agency for me. And Queen. Queen's going to cost you a lot. He's going to cost you a pretty penny. I don't know how I feel about spending that on Patrick Queen. But I will say, going back to the San Francisco model that we just went over, one of their big early purchases was Quan Alexander on a 4-year, like $64 million deal or something like that. One of their big high-ticket items like in 2018 when they first got there. 2nd year was Quan Alexander, I believe. So, and it worked out for him. He played really well for them, and he was a good player for them when healthy. His problem was he wasn't healthy very often, but when he was healthy, he was good, and I think he helped those young linebackers that they ultimately drafted along there in San Francisco. So I wouldn't rule that out, but I already told you this year, like that was year 2, that big ticket item. This first year, I don't think you're going to see a lot of big ticket items. It's going to be a lot of 1 and 2 year deals, just like it was when Ronald and company came in here, just like Adam Peters and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan did in their first year, just like the Texans and Nick Caserio did in their first year. Generally, when you get a new GM, Lions did the same thing with Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. Generally, when you get a new GM and a new head coach, they want to come in and they want to get players that fit what it is they want to do. And a lot of the guys here are already free agents or don't exactly fit what it is they want to do. So I don't see them spending big on a position like linebacker in year 1. Amenahu, on the other hand, and I think I'm thinking of a whole different dude. That last name. I just messed his last name up. I'm thinking about Charles Amenahu. That's not how you say his name. But I remember him, Mike. I think he was in Seattle at one point. I don't know where he is now. He was drafted, if I'm not mistaken, out of Michigan. I don't know where he is now. But there are a couple of offensive guards, interior offensive linemen that I think would make good fits here potentially, and they're not going to cost you a whole hell of a lot. And I think one of those needs to end up here in Washington, to be honest with you, unless you plan on kicking Andrew Wiley inside and not spending any draft capital on guard at all. Because hell, the kid we drafted out of Utah, Braden Daniels, he might end up being a guard. Who knows? Like, we don't even know some of the shit that we have because we didn't even get to see it. So who knows? Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Command Post Live. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I thank you guys for joining me. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. Tomorrow, we'll see what happens weather-wise. If it's a snow day, I might not be as active as I want to be because the kids are probably going to be home. If it's not a bad weather day, then you'll definitely see me for the Louie T Network podcast. And I might have I got a gem of a show for y'all that I got lined up, but I may not get to it. It just depends on what the situation is back at the crib. So we'll see what the weather does. It's supposed to snow pretty much starting at like 3 a.m. here all the way to 1 p.m. That's what the weather report says. I don't believe it, but we'll see. Anyway, I digress. You guys, get out of here. I'll see you tomorrow for the podcast no matter what. Hopefully I'll be able to get that upload out to you guys tomorrow. If not, I'll get it to you at some point. It's coming. I just would prefer it to be tomorrow. So you'll have something to watch over the weekend. But either way, we chopping it up on Saturday. We chopping it up on Sunday because we got games. So you guys enjoy the rest of your evening. I'll see you guys tomorrow. If not tomorrow, see you on Saturday. If not Saturday, see you Sunday. If not Sunday, see you Monday. Have a good one. God bless. Good night.